Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last episode of Season 3, my end of year special. You could probably see from my face, I'm a little bit red I've had a big day, and you're about to experience this big day. My end of year specials, I have brought back guests from the previous year's episodes to talk about what we've learned. And this year, I've done something really special, and I reached for the stars, and it worked. I have been bringing back this year hosts of podcasts that I listen to that become part of my journey, and I wanted to bring them back on, as well as others that I haven't interviewed yet, in one giant podcasters roundtable, so to speak, for you to be able to get something from them that I get every day listening to their podcasts. And it was a reach. I reached out for everyone. I got most of the guests that I asked to come on board. They were all so wonderfully accommodating to my show, and we traveled around the world. I have guests from the United Kingdom, Europe, USA, Canada, and Australia, of course. And the complexities of the time zones was just the scariest bit. And then the tech that went with it. But today we have some wonderful guests. I've gone straight into each guest as I've talked to them about. You will find that there is a common theme amongst most of them. Most of the guests are from actors themselves or teachers of the business side of acting or acting training, as well as some industry podcast gurus, for want of a better word, to talk about podcasting and how we use this medium to educate and meet people and to tell people our journeys and storytelling. And these are all the stories that have come out today. So it's a very, very long episode. I really hope that you can stick with it, because every guest is special in their own. Pause it, come back to it, and finish it up, because I truly believe that this is a fantastic experience. And everybody, regardless of whether you're an actor or podcaster or just someone else listening to my show, you will take some great stuff away from it. So what I'm going to do is I won't have a post show comment today. I think you'll get everything you need from the show. I want to go right quickly into now. I'm going to go through the list of the guests that we had on board. I introduced them quickly and we go straight into it. Their bios and links for everything they offer are in the show notes, so please check that out, and please follow them. If you find their podcast interesting, please follow their podcast and listen to it, because you're going to take so much away from it. So here we go. I'm going to bring my cheat sheets out and I'll try and go through very quickly, because you don't need to listen to me today. We need you to listen to them. So thank you very much. And here we go. We have James Cridland from Pod News Weekly. So straight into the guru. I hope he's okay with me using that. But James is an editor of Pod News, as I said, and a radio futurologist. He has worked in audio since 1989, developing new platforms and technologies in radio and podcasting, including pioneering streaming radio and podcasts at Virgin Radio. He has been involved in shaping platforms like BBC, iPlayer, and Radio Player, advising various global media companies on digital transitions. And he is a wonderful man to chat with, and I'm sure you'll take something out of it. Followed up with his co-host on the Pod News Weekly, Sam Sethi out of the UK. I've been talking with Sam recently and assisting him. He is the CEO of True Fans FM, which is a podcast player that is under the Podcasting 2.0, which we talk about. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, listen in, because it is the future of payment structures, not just in podcasting, but hopefully maybe for actors. And we talk about that as well. Sam is a tech enthusiast and an award-winning radio presenter himself. He brings his passion for technology and media to his podcast, Pod News Weekly, where he discusses the latest in tech and media with an entertaining and insightful style. Great chat. You will really get something out of that. And then we move on with Amy Linden. She is the host of Actors You Are Enough. Amy is wonderful. She is a celebrity acting coach and the creator of the Linden Technique, which has helped over 56 series regulars and many working actors. She's also an award-winning actress and filmmaker herself in her own right. Her podcast, as I said, Actors You Are Enough, focuses on empowering actors to believe in themselves and succeed in the industry. Then we go on to Brian Pataka, and he's the host of Brian Breaks Character. Brian Pataka is the host of Brian Breaks Character, as I said, a podcast that helps creative professionals align with their spiritual purpose and overcome self-doubt. His mission is to bust the myth. His mission is to bust the myth of the suffering artist and help creatives thrive in their careers. We all need that. And then we go a returning guest, Janet McMorty of Second Act Actors, another late bloomer just like myself. Dr. Janet McMorty is a sports medicine physician in Canada and actor who began her acting journey during the pandemic. As a second act actor herself, or a late bloomer, her podcast, Second Act Actors, explores the challenges and rewards of starting an acting career later in life. And another returning guest, a friend of mine and mentor, Jeff Seymour, aka the real life actor. Jeff Seymour is a veteran actor and acting coach with over 4 decades of experience. He is the creator of the real life actor technique, which emphasizes authenticity and realism in acting. Jeff has worked extensively in TV, film, and theatre and continues to act and coach around the world. And I always love having a chat with Jeff, so you'll get something out of that. And he has an announcement for 3 brand new books coming out in November, which is big news for us. And that's what I want for Christmas. So get together with the family, make sure that's what happens. Thank you. Now, next guest is Dwan Johnson, Think Bigger Actors. Dwan is a working actor and certified life coach. His podcast, Think Bigger Actors, delves into the mindset required to succeed in the entertainment industry, emphasizing the mental and emotional journey of actors. And he is just a wonderful man to chat with. And he has a voice that is just awesome to listen to, which is why I listen to his show, as well as the information he gives. Our next guest going on is Alicia Oxy, and she is from the podcast That One Audition, which says it all. She is an actress, best-selling author, and host of That One Audition. I keep repeating myself, but at least you're getting it. Where she interviews actors and industry professionals about their most pivotal audition moments, and they can be wonderful. And she gets some wonderful guests on board, and hearing that one audition that is truly memorable for them, usually in a positive way, but some negative ones, which are great to listen to. Her podcast reveals valuable insights on perseverance and success in the acting world. And then we go back to an industry guest, Jordan Blair, and she's from my hosting company, Buzzsprout, who provide me all the services that I need for my show to reach the world. And she also co-hosts their podcast, Buzzcast, where they reach out to everyone that's their company customers, as well as anyone else that wants to listen to learn about podcasting and what's changing and what's coming. Jordan Blair is a part of the Buzzsprout podcast team, as I said, and co-host of the podcast Buzzcast. So please check that out. She's also a podcaster in her own right, where she created Dreamful, a bedtime story podcast, and performs as a children's entertainer, helping craft creative experiences for young audiences. And it was wonderful to chat with her. Her team was not quite in the front line, but they're very, very close to the current hurricane. So I'm glad to know that they're all safe and sound as well from that. Moving on, this is reaching out. We stepped into Germany in Europe with Anne Alexander Cedar, and she's the host of Act Bold. Anne is the host of Act Bold, where she shares insights on building a thriving acting career. Her podcast focuses on giving actors the tools they need to take bold steps in their careers and create lasting success. So she's also a second act actor, a late bloomer per se, maybe, having been a younger actress and then got married in Germany, having a child, and then came back to it and is now returning what she's learned on her journey with her listeners on her podcast. So it's wonderful. If we move on to another returning guest, the wonderful Rachel Baker from Don't Be So Dramatic. We're now home in Australia. Rachel is an actress, model, and host of Don't Be So Dramatic, a podcast that explores the different roles in the entertainment industry. She is also a producer and writer with a passion for storytelling across various media. And then, lucky last, was Emily McKnight. She's currently in Brisbane. She's a Sydney actress, and she is the host of An Actor Survives. Emily is an actor, musician, and children's entertainer based in Sydney. She hosts An Actor Survives, where she interviews actors and creatives about their strategies for surviving and thriving in the industry. She is also known for her work as Emily Who, a children's performer. So there you go, guys. That is what you've got ahead of you. It is absolutely wonderful. There's some strong themes of community and education and being resilient and strong in your journey and understanding technology. So please listen and watch, or watch, depending if you're using YouTube or on podcast, and enjoy the show. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing season 3 to you. Thank you for being part of my journey. Everyone that's on the show today now is part of my journey. I'm part of their journey, and that's what it's all about. So thank you, and we'll see you on set. Enjoy. James, thank you very much for joining me on the show. How are you today?
It's a great pleasure. It's good to be asked. Thank you.
And you're coming from Brisbane, but you're not in Brisbane at the moment. Is that correct?
No, I'm not in Brisbane. I am in Canada. It's conference time, and I'm floating around from conference to conference. And yes, Ottawa is where I currently am, just for a couple of days. It's an interesting old place. Hasn't changed much since the last time I was here 20 years ago.
Wow. I've got friends in Canada at the moment. They've been sending photos of the Aurora Borealis. So
yes,
get to see that. You've probably seen it before, but
very nice.
Hey, James, the reason why I'm getting everyone together on this episode is that I am an actor and I have my own show. Obviously, we're on it at the moment, the Late Bloomer Actor, but I listen to a lot of podcasts myself. Obviously, most of them are acting related, but I do have what I call some outliers. And that is why you are on the show today, because you are the host of Pod News Daily and Pod News Weekly, which I got on board, which is helping me understand the world of podcasts and the technical side and everything. And we're waiting on Sam Sethi, who is your co-host for the weekly show as well. So, but James, you are an editor of Pod News and you are a journalist from the BBC in the history, and now Australian journalist, I believe, and traveling around the world doing what you do.
Yeah.
So in your experience with the evolution of radio and podcasting, because I know you have a lot of that, you've seen times change, what do you think actors, especially perhaps like late bloomers like myself, can learn from the way audio content creators connect with their audience? Because as actors, we have a visual medium, like we can see each other now and we have to deliver. But when you come to a podcast or delivering in that way, there's a very different style to connecting with the audience, whether that be in storytelling or in news and journalism. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly the audio method of communication is really important, and actually making sure, I think something like, we're told that, yes, visual is important, but the audio is just as important, if not more so. So being able to understand how best to communicate using audio, how you can get your moods over purely in audio, how you can make people smile and or not smile, so to speak, is I would guess a particularly useful thing. It's just that what I like about audio particularly is what you can do with it, what you can do with just pauses and with the tone of your voice and everything else. It's a very important part. I would, of any type of communication, and that might include acting as well.
And do you find that obviously it would be very different between the live medium that we do now as podcast hosts and storytelling per se, that's recorded with a script per se?
Yeah, I mean, scripted podcasts, it's always important to know how to deal with a script, because actually quite a lot of what you listen to is actually scripted, even if it doesn't sound that way. So that's an important sort of side note to it. But I think, podcasting has so much opportunity in terms of fiction podcasting. You can obviously do an awful lot of acting in those. And just, how to use the voice correctly is always a good plan.
That's awesome. And just going on a sort of a little bit of a tangent, but with your understanding of podcasts, and now this is where I wanted to chat with Sam. So he's coming from the UK. It's 9:30 at night for him, so maybe he's struggling to get online. So hopefully we still see him. But you talk a lot about value for value in podcasting, and you're aware of it. And for the guests that don't know how that works, it's called streaming sats, which scares the crap out of everyone, because as soon as you mention Bitcoin, people are out of there. But I love the concept of it, because the new podcast players have the ability for you to pay the people that you listen to, value for value. So you're choosing what you're giving, et cetera, et cetera. Now, do you see the value of that expanding in an acting world concept, or even over anything? Because we live in a world now where nobody's getting paid anymore, and AI is taking over, and the big businesses are making millions, and the hard workers aren't. So do you see that value for value being something that's really going to change the face?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Value for one way of doing value for value, by the way, is streaming sats. But you don't have to use Bitcoin if you don't want to. There are other ways of using the idea, and the idea really is, if you get value from what someone does, then give them value back, and that value might be in terms of treasure, in terms of money. It might be in terms of time, in terms of just, enjoying what that person is producing, or it might be in terms of talent as well. So perhaps you might help that person promote their show, or perhaps you might help that person produce artwork, or whatever it might be. And obviously, the money side of that can be going to a website and giving a credit card and an amount of money, or it might be using a little bit more sort of attention-based work, such as streaming sats as well. I find it really interesting that we're moving, therefore, away from an experience where you are asking for a price. When you go into a coffee shop and you say, I'll have a cup of coffee, then there is a fixed price to that coffee shop for making that coffee. And it includes the person's wage, it includes the price of the milk and the price of the coffee and all of that kind of stuff. With creative content, there is a different kind of way of costing that out, if you like. And I think it's very interesting to basically turn around to somebody and say, if you're getting value from this, give us some money, but you don't necessarily need to tell them how much. You don't necessarily need to say this is worth $2, because one person might think it's worth $10 or $20. I think that there's definitely something interesting there in giving somebody what you think it's worth. And I think that that's something that is relatively unique when you're looking at giving somebody something in return for something that doesn't necessarily have a cost to it, but that you get great value out of. So I think it's fascinating to watch. There are some podcasts that have made a living from doing this, from basically asking people to give them value back. There are some podcasts that get a healthy additional amount of revenue out of that. But I do think it's a very interesting time in earning money, where you can actually turn around and say, whatever you think this is worth, please share some of that with us.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as I mentioned before, we live in a world where the big businesses seem to be making billions and billions of dollars. And if we look at Spotify, for example, they take your monthly fees to use their platform, and they are making a killing from it. But the artists, you keep hearing that they don't. Now, Sam Sethi's True Fans platform and some of the other V4V platforms are now paying musicians this value for value. So when you listen to the artist's music, you're streaming these sats, or you're making the boost, so you're choosing to give them some money, and they are walking away with tenfold the kind of dollars that they're receiving on Spotify, being such a big platform. So it's very interesting, and it sort of leans a bit towards the need for a universal basic income, if you've ever heard of that. As the checkout chick, so to speak, is replaced by a computer, these people no longer have work, but the businesses are still earning the income, the money coming through. But if their customers no longer have jobs, it's going to end up in a bad spot one day, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely, it is, absolutely. But I mean, I think it is interesting looking at. I mean, the idea of a universal basic income is something that has been tried by a number of different countries and things, and I think, the creative arts is a very difficult. It's a very difficult industry, really, to get a handle on, in terms of, it's easier to understand the price of a cup of coffee because you can see the raw things that are required for that. It's much harder when you start talking about creative endeavor, and how much is that painting worth? And why is that painting worth 10 times or 100 times more than the other painting? You know what I mean? So I think from
Yes.
that point of view, that is all fascinating. Really interesting to end up seeing. What I think where the difference is between the Spotify model and the more direct model is that Spotify, of course, isn't paying the artists. Spotify pays the record companies, and it's up to the record companies how much they share with the artists and what they share with the artists. And I think the interesting thing around doing this on a more direct basis through streaming payments is that allows you to say, for example, in the case of the Pod News Weekly Review, which is the long form podcast that I do, I can actually say Sam gets 50% and I get 50%. But that might be different. That might be different if I have somebody, for example, who is doing the artwork, and I might pay them 10% and Sam and I 40%, or whatever that might end up being. So, so I think that's the interesting thing. You can actually take an entire layer of payment out of this to basically allow you to go, okay, we don't need any of these management companies anymore. We don't need publishers anymore. We don't need any of this stuff. We can actually go direct. And I think that's where it gets, really interesting. That agents and and those types of people are, can be, if you want them to be, cut completely out of that, the payment completely, which is always an interesting thing to talk to actors about, cutting agents out.
Yeah, well, especially for the agents. But yeah, it's interesting when you watch a movie and you see the credits right down to the gaffer, and there's so many people, and you can see the concept of that. If they were all receiving 0.00001% of the income, and it was automated through that process, that every time someone watched that movie and either paid for the movie directly or paid through value for value, because if they chose that would trickle down and you get that payment, so to speak. So, James, thank you very much. It was a shame that we didn't get Sam in at the same time with you in the room, but maybe we'll get him as a separate recording. But as I said, we've got a big experiment today going across the entire world, from the UK, Canada, USA, and Australia, and one from Europe as well. So I've got to try and squeeze everyone in. But
very good.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Last thing before we go, as with your experience and your knowledge in the podcast arena, where do you see podcasts going? We always hear the negative naysayer saying podcasts are done and dead for, but I feel like it's positive. What would you say in that area as we finish up?
I think there are a lot of different podcast industries, and I think, it's been an interesting time for the really massive podcasters who've been spending an awful lot of money and getting an awful lot of money spent on them. That is a tiny proportion of podcasting as a whole. And I think that podcasting, if you look at the vast majority of podcasting, it's a great future for where we're going. Being able to really focus on communities of common interest and to reach as many people as you possibly can, I think it's a fantastic time. So, I think the future is very bright and very good.
I love it. Thank you very much. And I will put the links for the Pod News Weekly and the Pod News Daily and everything that you do, James, into the show notes. And I thank you very much for joining us today.
That's very kind of you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Mr. Sam Sethi, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
I don't know if I call you David or the late bloomer actor. What do I refer to you as?
Whichever one you want, that's fine. But David's cool. It's good to chat with you on the show. We've been chatting a little bit about True Fans, your podcast player that I use amongst some others as well. So that's fantastic to have you on board. Mate, we had a good chat with James before, so I sort of want to go a little bit to the side a little bit and look at your background on the technical aspects of things. But with someone with a strong tech background, how do you think embracing new platforms and technologies can benefit actors, especially late bloomers like myself who started later in life?
I think the role of the new platforms is there to directly support creators. I think it's hard for people within the podcast community who've got a dedicated small audience to go and find sponsors, to go and find big advertising deals. That's just not working. And so the long tail of podcasters, which is the majority, need another way to find some support in monetary terms, not just in thank you very much and here's a thumbs up and a clap and a hands. So I think the technology that's being developed is going to be, slow to adopt is what we're seeing, but it will accelerate. And when it does, I think people will get it. And then the creators, like actors, will be able to go direct to their fans and, earn some trust.
I love it. And I was talking to James a lot about the value for value system. And I did mention, that I pay you guys through your podcast through streaming sats. And as soon as you mention Bitcoin, people panic. And my son straight away, Bitcoin, oh, that's the end of the world. But as James correctly pointed out, it's not just about sats and streaming and Bitcoin payments, which is the payment system at the moment, but it's the ability to support a show through things like Patreon or subscribing through Buzzsprout, which is my podcast host, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways. One of the tags is called a funding tag. And so you can put a URL link to, as you said, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee. You can have a link to, with Buzzsprout, to, a monthly subscription in the fiat currency. So the reason why we are trying to push micropayments are simply because it's programmable money. That's the difference. Okay. Fiat money is a straight one tender. If I've got $10, I can only give it to you. If there was two of you in the podcast, I can't split it. But with programmable money, which is a key element, and it just happens to be Bitcoin micropayments. And I don't know, in a year's time, it could be, the digital currencies that each country is looking to bring into place. But right now, the mechanism is micropayments. And so, yes, it allows us to do clever things with them. It allows us to say, right, I'm going to pay David, but I'm also going to pay, maybe two other people who produce the show with him, or maybe someone who's the editor, or if it's a band, the guitarist gets paid and the drummer as well as the singer. And nobody has to go, right, I'll get a calculator out and work it out. It's all done through the technology.
The automation of it, which is fantastic. Like you said, say I brought on an artist on my show and played one of their songs, whether in its an entirety of that, I can say, well, I've just got value from them and my listeners have got value from them. You guys are paying me some value. So for this episode, 1% of my earnings will go to that artist for their contribution. And then they just get it automated through. So if I get 10 listeners, they get 10 Bitcoins or 10 tokens if we're using tokens. But if I get 1,000 listens, they'll get 1,000, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
As part of the breakdown.
Exactly. And I think that's the value for value element. And look, we know this is a slow burn, right? As you said, your son's got oh my God, it says the word Bitcoin on it, run. And that's because people like Sam Bankman-Fried and others who've, muddied those waters. I think later on, when we start to look at how some of the newer models, I mean, again, this is very, very futuristic, but some of the new models where you get paid to listen to advertising, where because of micropayments, we can do better metrics. So with your own podcast, right? One of the things you can only do today is download measurements, right? How many downloads did you get, David? And the advertisers, that's all they do.
I hate them. Yeah.
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 But when somebody says, how many listens did you get and how long did they listen for it? Oh, I don't know. That's first party data. I haven't got all of that data. But that data is what we're trying to work on as a replacement for downloads. So listen time and percent completed. And then the other part of it is when you say, actually, you know what? The podcaster gets paid by the advertiser, but why don't I also split some of that value with my listener? And then the real value comes back to the advertiser, which is if they're streaming sats to the listener and podcaster and you stop listening to their ad, they stop paying you. So what have you just got? You've got how long I listened to your ad, because you're only paying me for the bit that I actually listened. So there's lots you can do with programmable money. And that's what I think people are missing. They're just seeing it as a straight single one transaction. They're not seeing the splits. They're not seeing the wallet switching. They're not seeing the reverse payments. There's a lot that will come from it. And then when people understand it, they'll go, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and there's a big benefit in that from advertising, I suppose, because they're getting data about when are the listeners turning off. Are they listening to the whole ad, or are they done halfway through? The same as our podcast, which is a big thing for an advertiser, as well as the fact that for the people who listen to the whole advert, well, then they go, well, that person's listened to for a reason. Whereas you spend $10,000, $100,000 for an advert in the Super Bowl. I think it's $1 million to get an advert.
Yeah,
in the Super
crazy
Bowl,
numbers.
But for standard TV, you don't know who's watching, you don't know who's caring, but you still have to pay that $1 million fee, don't you?
You do, but look, let's take it back to podcasting. It's the dirty secret of podcasting, the emperor's new clothes. Your downloads aren't to listen, and actually most metrics don't tell the advertiser, did anyone actually listen to my ad? That was the third ad in that podcast, because I don't know how long the person actually listened to the whole podcast. So if you can't tell me, A, it was male or female, where they came from, and how long they listened to your podcast, you're certainly not going to be able to tell me, even if they did they listen to my ad? And that's the problem. We're selling a belief system to advertisers, and they're going to get bored. They're going to say, no, this isn't working. I'm going to go somewhere else and put my money. We need to change the model.
I like that. And then bringing it into, I chatted with James about this as well, but we're in a world now where big business is still making their multi-millions and multi-billions of dollars of profits, but they are starting slowly to replace people with AI. Whether we're talking about the checkout chick at your supermarket, who's now a cash register, or on the acting side of things, voiceovers and background artists are being replaced by AI. But the people making these things, or the people running the businesses, are still making the same profits. So we need to find a way to pay people, because at the end of the day, they are the customers. And if they don't have a job, they can't be a customer. So we'll end up in a black hole, won't we? So do you think that this V for V could work in an acting context? So if I watch a movie and then the stats, you can stream all your benefits to all the people who made the movie.
Totally. And again, what we're seeing is with TV, the money goes from the advertiser to the TV company, but the money's not sent forward to the person watching it, or fairly split with the people who are creating it. So I think there are models. I mean, I went to see Yuri Noval Harari tonight with his new book, Nexus, and talking about AI. And yes, there will be people whose jobs are lost, but there will be new jobs created as well. We've seen this time and time again, right? No one has a typing pool. No one has a stenographer, right? These jobs are gone and they're never coming back. But newer jobs will appear. I don't know what they are right now. And I think also with actors, going back to that market space, even though you might be able to create a script with an AI, you need to have somebody who's got the intelligence to create the prompts that enable the AI to create the script. So that creative spark, that storyline of a writer still doesn't go. With an actor, you can license your voice. With an AI, we can still tell it hasn't got deep emotion. And there's so much that AI won't give us that humans still do. And I think if we lose that human touch between us, then I think we are in serious problems.
Yeah, fair enough. And we had a discussion yesterday about a whole podcast episode that was brought out with 2 AI voices, and I was absolutely amazed at how real they sounded, even though you could tell they weren't quite real. But if you weren't listening, if you didn't pay attention, you would just think it was Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so to speak, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Scary. Sam, just before we finish up, thank you very much. I wanted all the hosts of podcasts that I brought on, as I said, most of them are acting related, but people like yourself and James talk about podcasting because that's how I'm listening to your show, to get more information and learn about how to use this medium. With your background and understanding of the text of podcasting and in journalism, how do you see this medium being used for storytelling, regardless of whether it's scripted or a news program like Pod News? It's all about still that reaching your audience through this medium, isn't it?
From time immemorial, humans have told stories to each other. That is what's connected us. That is what's kept us real. Those stories have, in many ways, lasted the period of time, right? We still tell the story of Noah's Ark, and we still tell the story of Christmas. Those are stories podcasting is just a new way of conveying those stories. And in a world of AI, I think we need more podcasting, not less. I think we need more human connection, not less. Yes, the AI can go off and do the calculus on some crazy spot deal, and maybe it will, send a robot to send my drone to deliver something to me. But it will never have emotion. It will never have feeling. It will never have that human connection. And I think podcasting, when you feel it properly done, you can feel people who are enthused by what they're talking about, then you really enjoy it. And I think that's what we want. It's it's in our ears, it's very personal. And I think we shouldn't try and AI it just because if all you want is just fast information, well, fine, great. But that is not what I want. I want to have the understanding and maybe a little laugh along the journey as well while I'm listening. And, at the end of the day, feel that I've learned something maybe, but at the same time, I've had a laugh as well.
And it's about that personal approach that you feel like the host or whoever you're listening to on the other end is talking to you. And that's how we learn as podcasters to deliver that story or that moment, isn't it?
Indeed.
And it's to finish up. Thank you. You're coming from the UK, and that's what this medium is about. We are now, the world is connected, and yes, AI might be replacing certain things, but we have that ability to reach each other no matter where we are in the world, no matter what time that is. As much as juggling the time zones has been fun now, and that's why it's great. So, Sam, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be involved with you for your podcast player, True Fans FM. It's going gangbusters. I'd love to see where it's going and being a user of it. So thank you for letting me be involved with that.
David, thank you so much. And hey, thanks for all the feedback. Keep it coming. We're trying to get the product to where it needs to be. It's early days, but we're going to be 2 years old in a week's time. That's all we are, 2 years old.
Wow. And 2 years is nothing. Yeah,
no.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Sam. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And I'd like to say to most of them, I guess I'll see you on set, but I'll see you on the platforms.
See you soon, Sam. My friend.
It's been awesome.
Take care.
Cheers, mate. Good morning, Amy. Good morning for me and good afternoon for you. How are you?
I'm good. I think it's so exciting what you're doing. Like, how'd you come up with this grand idea?
I don't know. I tend to find things that sound really, really exciting at first, and then when I put them into plan, I start to panic and scare the crap out of myself. So I wanted to, as an actor, I'm an actor, and actors are actors. They do their network and they're reaching out and they seek their education from all sorts of mediums. Now, I run a podcast myself, obviously, because you are on it, the Late Bloomer Actor, to share information with people that listen to me. But I also listen to a myriad of other podcasts, mostly acting related, and then some outliers that I'm having on the show. And I wanted to bring those people in because they are part of my journey as an actor. And Amy, you run a podcast called Actors You Are Enough, as well as you're a coach and trainer of the Linden technique, which is, I've read your bio, has helped over 56 series regulars and many working actors. So your technique has helped so many actors book roles. What's one piece of advice you'd give to any actors, but I'll be selfish and say late blooming actors, who may not have had the time or traditional trajectory, excuse my English there, but want to book roles in a competitive market?
Well, first and foremost, I think everybody has to remember why they became an actor to begin with. Is because you want to share your point of view, really, with the world. And I think people forget that they get so caught up in techniques and what people tell them that they should be doing, and they forget that they are the cherry on top, that the reason why we go to the movies is to see a particular person because of who they are as a person. And so a really big philosophy of the Linden technique is to learn how to empower yourself with yourself, understanding what your gift is to the world and what the legacy is that you want to leave, and how are you bringing that to your role. The technique is based in the story because everybody's storytellers. So if you guys could imagine telling a great story, it has a beginning, middle, and end. But for some reason, a lot of people run lines, and it ends up to be a beginning, and a beginning. So, so I basically turn out great storytellers, and
Nice.
what makes somebody great is their understanding of what the writer intended. And so I think people get in and they make choices right away, and they'll miss stuff. And that's why the booking ratio of all my people is so high. And it doesn't matter where you've trained. I mean, I've trained people from Juilliard. I've trained people from like Yale School of Drama. They weren't much better than somebody that only trained in my technique and never trained anywhere else. It's how you are as a storyteller, and do I care about you?
That's interesting. So how does that come into that? We always hear about character, and an actor should become the character, and then on the other side of the fence, someone says, "No, you are the character, and you just have to play yourself."
It's
Do you
all
see
semantics,
that?
David. Semantics. It's all semantics. You read something. If the guy says he hates the woman, don't come up with some backstory that's not written. He hates her. So, how is it written? And then ask yourself, where's hate for me? But the character has to come first. If you keep putting yourself before the character, then you do what I like to call Kevin Costnering it. That you're just going to be Kevin Costner, you know? Like, how are you going to be able to morph into so many characters? The way that you'd be able to morph is if you put the character first. So you go, okay, the guy hates this woman. Well, where's hate for me? Okay, guess what? I can play him.
Oh,
It
that's
needs
wonderful.
to be that easy. Everybody makes it so complicated.
I like that, and I've been seeing a coach here in Australia that he said to me, and he said to everyone in our class, he says, you can all act. You don't need to go and get any acting classes anymore. It's about your delivery and about what you're, especially in an audition context. So with your background, your training, do you see any difference in the way an actor needs to deliver for an audition as compared to on set, or does it not matter?
How you book it is not going to be how you shoot it for television. How you book it is always how you shoot it for film.
Okay.
Okay? There's a dynamic and an understanding about television. Television is a corporate medium. And so if you're not watching television, you're not going to book television. It's just really understanding genre, tone, and style. And I think a lot of actors don't put that in they don't put it in the quotient when they're breaking down their scripts. Because, I mean, I played a prostitute on NCIS. I mean, her name was Goldilocks. And I was in like all these scenes, but that's not the point. The point is she was the cleanest prostitute ever. Now, I come from the theater, okay? Had I looked at prostitute, I would look skanky. I would look really, really skanky, because a theater brain will make you do things that a television brain can't relate to. So had that same prostitute been in The Walking Dead, it would be a different prostitute.
Yes, of course.
So your teacher's right in the sense of it's not about how you act, it's how you approach it. But you have to know you could be a great actor, but not for the show that they're casting. And so if you understand the show and you breathe the show, and you also know how they even dress people for the show. Like somebody showed me they went out for a show that was very bright and sunny and comedy, and he went in for a very flamboyant character, and in his self-tape he's wearing all black. And he's like, yeah, but I'm blah, blah, blah. They wear black. I go, yeah, but you're on this show, and everyone's colorful on the show. There's no way you would book the show. Because no matter how great an actor you are, if you don't look like how they cast for their show in the genre that they're working under, you're not going to get the job.
So that comes down to doing your part in the research area of what you're going. So you just can't just go, oh, I'm just an actor, I'll just do it and go. You've got to have that understanding of who's made the show, what's the history of the show, if it's got a history, what's the storytelling about, what's the history of the story, where's it gone from the start to now?
Absolutely. It's almost a science in a way, because if you want to book a co-star, you got to know what your batting order is. I mean, you're batting 10th and you're out in the outfield catching balls, and sometimes you're on the bench. You're the support team. And so a lot of people, they pick up a script and they go, okay, I'm going to do it this way. Well, it might not, the way that you decided to do it might pull attention from the story that they're trying to tell for the series regular. It's the series regular is the main person. You're supporting their story. But people don't approach it that way.
That's beautiful. And it's a good crossover for what I'm trying to do in this special episode is because I've reached out to some of my hosts that run podcasts only, and explain podcasts. There seems to be an overwhelming sense it comes back to that storytelling. It's regardless of the medium, it's all about story. So if you're doing a podcast on news related, so I've spoken to James Cridland of Pod News. Every day he's just talking about what's happening in the podcast world, but it all comes down to story, doesn't it? So do you find the medium is any different? As an educator, you would teach people in the room, you teach them online, and you have your own podcasts. Do you see those mediums as different or just another method for an actor to learn?
Well, I was teaching in the theater for 25 years, and then COVID came, and I went on Zoom, and I never went back to the theater. And people are like,
Wow.
Why, Amy? Why aren't you teaching in theater? Zoom, everybody's being cast off of Zoom, or they're being cast off of the self-tape. So people that train with me, they're booking because they know how to work Zoom. They know how to work this 6x19, whatever. Not this, because this is different. Okay, but 19x6. Okay, and it's like an on-camera class. And so I get to see what they're doing. Even if they went like this for a second, you're pulling the casting director away from you. So the little things that you do, and I wouldn't be able to catch that if I was in the theater. So technology for me has been great because I am teaching people from all over the world. Whereas the theater, I was only teaching LA people or people that would fly in or whatever. I mean, I traveled a lot to different states, but then COVID came and nobody was doing that anymore. So it's like an on-camera technique class that I could really see if you're competitive, if you're swinging through, and I could see what you're doing in this space.
Yes. And I love that because I'm in Adelaide, Australia, and you're in the United States. I may never have met or heard of Amy Linden because of that. So it's wonderful because it now gives actors or anyone that's looking for information that scope to spread their wings, so to speak, and reach out. So I love it. Amy, as we finish up, I notice your shirt there is I Am Enough. How do you, obviously being the name of your podcast, is that the big driver of what you want to give to actors? What do you have to say to that statement, so to speak, as we finish up?
I'm glad you brought that up because I own this trademark.
I love that.
You guys, you're who's ever watching, if you go to IamEnoughCollection.com and put in the promo code enough20, you get 20% off of anything on the site. But this started because I feel that people want to be in business with people who are powerful. And you could be a great actor but not be powerful. It can't be here, and you have to know what your value is. And I've had struggle with that. And for the very reason that all of us are broken, that made us go to acting to begin with because of that brokenness. It's the same thing that's going to get you a big job, but you have to be able to be okay with yourself.
I love that.
And so I started this in 2006 because I just want to remind people that they are enough and that they are a gift.
I love that. And we live in a world that is just so hard now, and there's so much out there, and the resilience of actors needs to be so much stronger to push through.
Yeah, and a lot of people want to quit right now because of all the strikes and all the problems, and they can't quit because just when you're about to quit is when you're going to make it. So you can't quit. I'm sorry, you're never getting out. If you're an actor, you're always an actor.
I love it. I love it. Thank you very much, Amy. This has been very short and sweet. I love it, but we'll certainly try and get you on for a full episode. It's a pleasure to have you on with everyone that's on today, and it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys go to thelindentechnique.com.
And I will put all the links for everybody, including the Linden Technique, in the show notes. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Hello, Brian Pataka. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's absolutely wonderful to see you on my screen live. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm really glad to finally be here and to be connected with you today.
It's fantastic. I was saying to you just before we hit record that I feel like I'm one of those actors that's in that revolving room when they're promoting their movie. I'm just talking to face after face. So I've got this all day.
Wonderful. I mean, are you feeling you're going to be really good at it whenever the big films are happening? You'll be ready for your press truck. You've got the muscles working. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I'm reaching out to all my podcast hosts that I listen to, and some of them are educators and run their own podcasts. And you run a podcast called Brian Breaks Character, which I love that title, and that's what drew me to it the first time I ever found it. So it's a podcast that helps creative professionals align with their spiritual purpose. And my wife will laugh at me over this because I'm just don't play in that realm of that spiritualness sort of thing, and overcoming the self-doubt, which is big for all of us. So with your focus on this aligning with your spiritual purpose, how can actors, especially like myself who start later in life, use that mindset to break through self-doubt and create a fulfilling career?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate you having me here today to have this conversation. And I just want to make sure if anybody got freaked out about the word spiritual here, I want to make sure this is no dogma, no doctrine, no religion.
Of course.
And it's not very different from if you've ever read any self-help book in your life. And the way that I think this helps actors, and no matter what stage they are in their career, but particularly in the stage that you're talking about, where you're coming back to it, or it's later in life, and it can feel like the representation is not as many actors as we want to see on TV or on stages in that age range sometimes, right? And what I find is all of the career work, I put that in quotes, is easier when you live with the belief that you are meant to be an actor and there's a period at the end of that sentence. So suddenly getting headshots, trying to reach out to an agent, figuring out how to create your reel, editing these things. I don't want to think of it's not toys because they're not toys that you just play with, but they're a little bit like, oh, well, sure, I have to take care of this because I'm an actor. That's the end of the story here. Of course I have to do this. So some of the drama that can be attached to those things, or the history that we've heard of like, oh, that headshot looks bad, or I don't like the way I look, kind of gets to melt. So it gets to be held a little more, I like to think of it as being held more lightly, because your purpose is held with the most profundity and with the most energy and muscularity. And so that's a very simple, in one way this feels like a simple answer, but I think living through it, it does take continual tug of war of like, okay, wait, I'm just looking at headshots here. I'm an actor. I'm not meant to be good at taking headshots. I'm actually meant to be good at acting. So let me just take some of the heat off of this. And you know what? I'm really incredibly resourceful. I bet there are some people in my life that I can ask to be another set of eyeballs to be part of this process with me, because I want it to be the best that I am. And I know that I'm really close to this. And so I'm going to be very invested in how I look instead of what energy whatever this message is conveying across the screen here. And so I think that when we have the belief that we're meant to be an actor, we can come back to that resourcefulness. Our resources change, our temperature changes, our blood pressure changes when it comes to interacting with the business. And to me, that's really helpful to someone who's coming later in the business, because there may be new technology you have to learn, or new styles of headshots, or, oh my gosh, I got to get an agent. Is anybody ever going to care about me? Because I'm whatever age range I've decided is the one that they don't care about. And so to me, it just gives you more power. It empowers you in a way that says, I'm going to let these things have less power over the situation, so that I can do the work without being distracted.
I love that. I love that. So there's a lot of focus there. So you like to teach people more of the business side of acting. Would that be the right way of looking at it?
Yeah, I would say that that's true, because I think, like, I'm not teaching the craft of acting whatsoever.
Mhm.
That being said, because I was an actor for a long time and I made my living as an actor, like, of course, I think the reason why I'm good at talking about the business for actors is I have that history, so that I understand what it means to put a self-tape on or to go into a room with someone, and that piece of it, because we can't separate ourselves from our business as an actor. You know, a painter has the let's say the privilege of having their painting on the wall, and it is not their same self, right? Or
Yes.
a ceramicist, it's their ceramics, it's not their same self. So that lack of distance from what you're putting out there and who you are in your own life, I think creates a particular trap for actors, or a particular set of problems for actors, where I'm like, let's go in, let's figure that. That's like the trench that I love to be in. Yeah.
Do you see the world of acting as such a tough medium, because it's like going into a job interview 5 times a day and never getting the job, so to speak? So by focusing on the business side of it, do you think that's a way of actors to get that resilience, which I've been talking about today, about getting through it without having those? I talk about the troughs all the time. There's seems to be so many more troughs than the peaks. So is that a good way to look at it?
So this is dangerous, because actually I would love to be out of business, if I'm being honest, because I think that an actor should focus on the craft more than anything all the time.
Oh, okay.
Your time, energy, and money should be spent on doing the painting, doing the acting. The actor should be acting more than anything else that they do. So when they look at the wheel of life or hours in their day, if they're spending most of their time on looking at their computer on the business, they are not aligned with what I would say God-given, universe-given, Oprah, Buddha-given gifts have been given to them, where they are the most aligned with their spiritual purpose, where they're the smartest and most gifted and talented. You've gone to school, you've gone to drama school to learn how to use this instrument all the time, and the instrument is dusty unless audition. And that's a crappy spot to be brushing it off, because there's stakes in the game. It's not just I get to play in the sandbox of my creative soul here. There's a job that I want on the other side of this. So I don't think it's a good idea to look to the business for satisfaction or fulfillment ever, because it is not reliable. What is reliable is my acting work is good, or you know what, I'm having a hard time with this. My teacher keeps saying the same thing over to me again, and I don't know why it's coming up now. I've been an actor for 20 years. Why is this one thing now the thing I have to work on? Like, how annoying, or I could do better with that accent I've been trying to work on. The craft should be your home. And when an actor comes to me and they say, I'm all torn up about the business, my first question is not, let's look at your headshots. My first question is, when's the last time you acted? Let's go there first. And then we'll be able to do better work as a business when that's more secure. So it doesn't mean you have to put your business part on hold, but I need to see that that's happening in tandem. And there are certain actors that reach a certain, I use the word level is not the right word. So they reach a certain place in their career and themselves where they are not attaching the meaning to auditions, and the auditions do still feel like play. But I think most actors are not in that category. Most actors are attaching meaning to every audition that they get, or because the auditions are so far and few between, they have significance. We need to be able to play. So do not hang your hat on the business. The business will always disappoint you. Hang your hat on your acting, and then the business gets to be, oh, icing on the cake, I booked a job. I wanted to say very clearly, I know that I'm saying to you, you will not make your living as an actor. And I think it's not fair for most actors to hold that up against themselves. When I was coming up as an actor, it was still kind of possible, let's say. Right now, every actor I know, the ones that you will recognize from television, have other jobs that also fulfill them. So I just want to take that myth that you need to make your living for an actor and that means you're an actor. No painter does that. They'll have fellowships and scholarships and whatever. This is not the way art works, unfortunately. Someday, let's hope. But since that's not the way it is, putting that extra pressure on yourself, I think, holds you back instead of propelling you forward.
I love that. That's such a different way to look at it, because there's so many people pushing us in different directions. And I think it comes down to, I've heard, when you no longer love acting, that's the time to get out. And that pretty much, so let's focus. We need to know the business side of it. We need to know what's there. So have an understanding and make sure that you spend, have your Wednesday's my business day, but come back to what the craft is and what we love about it. Yeah. That's essentially what you're saying, is it? I love it.
Yeah, the way you said that, that's a beautiful way to say it. I think if you're not loving it, because I think if you start to say my happiness in acting is decided by the business, you're just on a bad path.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. And And just quickly before we finish up, because we can talk for hours, and that's certainly why we'll come back and we'll do a full episode with you, because I listen to your show and there's just so many gold nuggets, so to speak, that come out every single time.
Good. We work very hard to make sure that happens. So I appreciate you saying that.
I love it. And I think so bringing it down to, because I've been speaking to podcast hosts, most of them are acting related, but some are also about the business side of podcasting. But it comes down, everyone keeps talking about storytelling, how we tell a story. So with your medium as an educator in acting, and you use a podcast, how do you use these mediums, and how much is the storytelling component, the critical aspect of getting your message across?
It's interesting you asked me. So one of the guests we had on the podcast is from The Moth, which is like the preeminent storytelling organization in the United States. They're all over the world. The episode is with Kate Tellers, in case anyone wants to look it up. She's also one of my dear friends. So I've been growing up with her at The Moth forever.
I love it.
And one of the things, you kind of set me up here in a beautiful way. So thank you. Is when I'm hosting and I have a guest on, my questions the entire time are, this is how I'm imagining my audience. So those of you listening, this is how I'm imagining you. About to flip it off at any second and stop listening because you're bored. And so I am just always driving to ask the questions that are going to give my guest the power to be able to give what's valuable to my audience. My audience is not tuning into my podcast to listen to The Moth, which is proper storytelling, right? So the storytelling that I'm getting into is, how did you figure that out? And how did it then satisfy you as an artist? Like that's how did you figure out this piece of the business? And then it became the satisfaction for you as an artist. So within the story is the how to. So mine is a very specific focus in that way, which is, like you said, the golden nuggets that you're leaving with. I don't like, people will sometimes have me on their podcast, and thank goodness you didn't bring me in this way, David, which is they'll say, Brian, let's talk about you. And I'll be like, who cares about me? I'm not Nicole Kidman. I'm not a celebrity. What are we talking? No, we're not going to talk about me. Let's talk about my work, because my work is why someone's going to listen. That isn't to say like, I don't think I'm a cool person. That's not, but I'm saying like, that's not why I'm on a podcast. Right. And so for me to help a guest show up in a way where each listener is leaving with the golden nuggets, and for it to stick, that's where I think the storytelling comes. Where's the beginning, middle, end? What was it like before? What did you do to get to your after? That's where I think I push into the storytelling, is that piece of it. So mine is very mission driven. Like, how did you get there? Why did you do it? Why was that so important to you? And I think that's part of the reason why my podcast doesn't celebrate only like famous actors or people who have got a tremendous amount of success. Like, I want to know about, great, you got more auditions. Great, you got your first series regular audition. Great, you got your manager and agent. Let's talk deeply about how you did that. Because no matter where you are in your career, it's going to go up and down, where sometimes you could be at the top of your career and you got to look for a new manager, right? Like that could very easily happen. They decide to become a fisherman. Great, I need a new manager. So this is why I feel very privileged in that, you said, I'll kind of bring it home here. When you said at the beginning, I love the name of your podcast, which is Brian Breaks Character. And I had a real wrestle with that, because maybe you know what that is. Maybe you don't know what that is. People don't know what breaking character means. And I was like, no, that is the name of it, because my goal is to break into the character of actors and creative people and how they continue to keep maybe moving it forward. And a lot of people are like, you call it the actor this podcast or the actor that podcast. Like, nope, it needs to be, this is what it is, because that's the conversation that I want to have. So thank you for giving me the chance to share about that today.
I love that. Thank you very much. And I know you do have to run, so I think that's brilliant what we've got today. That's fantastic. It goes so well with everyone that I'm talking about, and the melding of these cross cultures and diversity of podcast hosts is fantastic. So thank you very much. I'll put the links to all your work and your show in the show notes, and we will see you for a full episode in 2025.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I'll talk to you soon. Be good. All right.
Love your work.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. And we have Janet McMorty back in the room. It feels like only yesterday that we did an episode together. How are you, Janet?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here and so excited for this. Thank you for including me.
And I was just saying off air before we started recording, I've just been so stressed this morning. I feel like one of those actors going from reporter to reporter promoting his movie, but it's working and I love it. So
it's just good practice for when that happens. We're just in training.
I had this dreamed this idea to do this as an end of year special, and then when I tried to put it into practice, I started panicking and go, oh my god, but it's working beautifully. So Janet, thank you very much. It's great to have you back on. I'll put links to your show and our previous show in there for the people that haven't listened to it, because that's naughty, they should have. But as a fellow late bloomer, in the world. What's one crossover lesson from your journey in medicine that you have to acting that can resonate with those of us starting later in our careers?
I think the biggest thing, and I think this is not just maybe specific to medicine, but just across the board for late bloomer second act actors, is the fact that, and I'm guilty of this, I had this weird feeling that because I didn't do quote unquote acting or a creative career prior to acting, that everything that I had done prior was just kind of a waste of time and not that useful. But what you did prior to pursuing a career in acting does not just vanish in a puff of smoke when you make the choice to either switch into a new career or do it simultaneously with your old one. Everything you've already done in your life leading up to this is so important and is so beneficial to your acting career. It gives you a character. You're already a character because you've grown, you've lived life, you've experienced things, and you've also experienced other humans in the world and witnessed them. So I think that's one of the big things, very specific to medicine, I would say, is I remember an acting coach once told me how lucky I was to be a doctor because I was basically living in a lab where I would just get to witness humanity all the time, you know, in the emergency department, in the operating room, in my clinic, with not just patients, but with my staff, with nurses, with colleagues, getting to witness human experiences and how people move and talk and respond is, a beautiful. It's like feel like I'm like looking at zoo animals, being like, "Ooh, how did you answer that question? Interesting. I want to see if I can replicate that in a self tape." It's very interesting to be witness to humanity because I think that's what acting is.
And your background in medicine is very similar to my job that we don't talk about, but in that you can see people and families or people and individuals at the worst moment of their lives. And then as an actor, we are trying to portray those moments in a sterile environment sometimes if you're doing an audition or if you're on set where it's not real. And so having that ability to draw on it and to know that, it always talks about with people, actors, when they have to cry and they turn it all on, but 99% of people don't want to cry in public and they fight it. And it's just those little intricacies, isn't it, that you see in the real world.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting to me was, you witness it in my career in medicine and your career that must not be named. But I don't know about you, but in my career, we were taught for good and for bad, but I think mainly for bad, like to put up an emotional wall when you're witnessing people at the worst stages of their lives, right? Because if you, the doctor, respond in a way that is very human, upset with them, empathizing, crying, just devastation, it's hard to maintain that throughout a 30, 40, 50-year career. You'll just burn out. The problem is that you've lost what makes you connect to the other individual. And so this is where I think my acting career has helped my medical career so much, because that emotional restraint I'd built up in medicine, I really had to work on tearing down in my acting career. And that bleeded right into my medical career as well, being like, no, like I want to connect with these people across from me as a human. And I think my patients and colleagues appreciate that. But my acting career has also helped me learn how to, I hate to use the word compartmentalize, but to kind of be able to come out of that depths of grief, depths of anger, depths of sadness, come out of it and just kind of say, okay, now I need to move on to the next patient. Now I need to move on to the next scene. I think it's a very intricate balance, but it's been really interesting seeing how the two careers have influenced each other positively.
I love that you've shown it to be a two-way street. We always hear that what we draw from one side of one's life into our acting world, but for that acting to go back into the real world is fantastic. You don't quite hear that often, do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a way better doctor because of my acting, for sure.
I love it. And I think we talked about it. I asked you the question that if the acting became fantastic and a big role, would you give it up? And you said certain aspects, yes, but not overall because you love it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That still holds true today. It changes hourly, but right now, in this moment in time, I'm like, yes, that answer is the same.
I get that. Now, Janet, as a podcast host, and I've already talked with a few guests about this, that this is a medium that comes across now, whether you're doing an interview style show like us, or you're doing a scripted podcast recording, or you're doing a news style program like James Cridlin and Sam Sethi that I've spoken to that talk about just the podcasting news. It all boils down to storytelling, and that's what it's come across. So in your experience with your podcast, how does the storytelling come across in an educational context? How does your listeners, what are they learning because of this delivery system we have?
I love that. I think the biggest thing is the storytelling obviously doesn't come from me. I think I will ask questions that I know usually give me nice stories, but the storytelling in my podcast comes from my guests, right? And I'm sure it's the same for you. And I think what my listeners really learn is that they're not alone, and that a lot of other people are experiencing similar feelings about either changing careers or experiencing the same feelings about this entertainment industry can be really frustrating. We can see on social media that it's all, heart stars and rainbows and beautiful things. And when I don't know, I feel my podcast, I hope my podcast digs a bit deeper into, what's been frustrating, what's been surprising, what's been funny, what's been, what's kept you going in this. And the stories come from people who are so vulnerable and sharing what they've been through. And I think the podcast medium is so unique in that way, in that we feel like we're just sitting on a couch somewhere having a conversation. It's very intimate. And I think that's where I think the best stories can come out. And oh my gosh, it's such an honor to be like the host of something like this, to have people tell their stories and let me broadcast them to my audience. Because from what I've heard from listeners, it's just so much of, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much, not just about the business of acting, but just life in general. And that, again, I'm not alone, and that there is a community of people.
I love that. And that's why I'm bringing everyone through here, because I listen to all these podcasts, and they are part of my journey as an actor, which is what I put out with my show. And so now, by bringing everyone together, now we have that connection. And I just wanted to show listeners that if you can reach all around the world and hear from people and guests and information, regardless of what it is, anywhere now. And that's what's fantastic in it, isn't it?
Absolutely agree.
Now, just quickly before we finish up, I don't want to let you go without asking quickly, how did the Olympics go?
Oh, it was incredible. It was
just
one
for
of
context,
those.
you went over as a doctor for the Paralympic team for Canada, didn't you?
Yeah, for Team Canada. Yeah, it was. I was in Paris for a month. I don't think I've been in a country other than Canada for longer than a month ever. Wow. It was a long time. I was in my Paralympic experience was 3 weeks in Paris, and living in the athletes village and the games and stuff. And then I got to travel around Paris with my father, which was really exciting for the week after. It was great, but it was wonderful. It was overwhelming. It was busy. It was chaotic. I think I got more emotional in that city than I have ever, just because I think, this was a professional dream of mine come true, but also witnessing athletic dreams of these athletes come true, not just the Canadians, but all over the world. It was really neat. And Paris is just ridiculous. It's so regal, and you turn a corner and here's more ornate things. You turn a corner, here's more ornate things. It was an incredible experience. One I will never forget. It was like I said, a dream of mine, and I'm so privileged to have been able to do it.
And how does something like that affect you when you come home on an acting perspective? There's something else to draw on now, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's funny because while I was there, I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and while I was there, it was during the Toronto International Film Festival, and that's like Christmas for actors. That is it's Canada's Academy Awards. We're going crazy, and so I quote unquote missed the opportunity. I thought I would feel a bit more FOMO And I actually didn't, because I was just doing something so professionally and personally fulfilling that I felt really good about what I was doing, and really kind of showcasing and being able to be in my other world of medicine was just, there were a lot of cool things that happened in Toronto, but I was like, you know what? I'm doing something that's so important to me and my career in medicine right now. And then, of course, I come back and I'm like, I want to be back in Paris where there's baguettes and but of course you come back and haven't been auditioning for a month, and our industry is kind of slowing down here in Canada because winter is coming. But it's just been like, I don't know what it's like down under, but for me, I have 4 auditions due tomorrow, and that's never happened in my life ever. And I'm like, what?
Panic.
So it's just kind of getting back into the swing of things, but I did miss the acting a little bit. I did do one audition while I was in Paris, and that was a riot. I was like in the athletes' village trying to find somebody to self-tape with me.
That is awesome.
It was great. Yeah.
Well, Janet, thank you very much for being, I know it's been quick, but this is a fantastic thing I'm putting together here. It's absolutely
really
wonderful
is.
to see you again. Janet McMorty from Second Act Actors. If you haven't checked out the show, it is, what you call us, the sister act show sort of, or we're like-minded. There's some words you used and I can't remember.
Oh, what did I use? Kindred spirits, was that what I used?
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's absolutely wonderful to have you on again, Janet. Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this. This is so cool.
It's working, and that's all that matters.
Yes, you are awesome. Thank you so much. It's such an honor.
Thank you very much, Janet. Cheers.
All right.
Beautiful. Good morning, Jeff. How are you? Welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I consider you to be a great friend and a mentor. So I really appreciate you being on this special end of year episode, which is your 3rd appearance on my show. I love it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the kind words, of course.
As I said, you've been my mentor on my journey as an actor. And as the real life actor approach that you teach online and through your courses and your own podcast, how does your philosophy of acting translate for actors like me who are jumping into the industry later but want to be as authentic as possible on screen?
Well, okay, sure. The beauty of the real life actor approach is that it doesn't do any of the old school stuff, in the sense that, we don't got to go back into time and talk about choices and beats and do a lot of silly exercises and whatnot that I just feel, on the whole, are basically outdated and useless. And those kinds of things, that kind of going back to square one, putting grown-ups, people who aren't kids out of high school through, all sorts of exercises that are supposedly going to open up their inner spirit and, cough out an artist or whatever. The fact that I don't have to go through that, I think something that's a lot more appealing to people that have actually lived life and had to be captains of industry, some other industry, have done whatever they've done. But I don't say that because, hey, here's a shortcut. You won't have to do all that necessary stuff. First of all, I don't think that stuff is necessary. Secondly, the whole approach is about utilizing what we practice every day anyway, and that is communication and emotions and all the stuff that we experience every day. I have found that a lot of the older people that come to me after having said, I wanted to do it in high school, and then, I let it go, I had a family, they actually bring a lot to the table because they have a much better idea of what life really is and what dramas and things are. They're just by nature of living more years, having had more life experiences, I think they have way more to bring to the table. So it isn't uncommon, and it happens. We've seen certain actors, there's not tons of them, but there are, who start way later in life, and they just are amazing, because they have kind of developed into these interesting people. So my approach at its heart, it's not just about getting old people up on their feet, it's of course young people too, is I don't want to waste my time doing all this kind of stuff. I just want to talk about what is most important to be an actor, how you become an actor, and how you break a scene down. And that has more to do with what it's like to break a scene down in life. You know, if you and I were talking about a problem you were having at work, and you said to me, wow, I can't seem to get the supervisor to understand this and that, you know, and he keeps giving me short shrift and la, la, la. And you were going to go in and talk to him and maybe another superior. We'd sit around and we'd break the scene down in life. I'd say, well, why do you think you're right here? And you tell me why you think you're right, why the other guy's wrong. I'd say, how are you going to prove that? So what do you want out of this meeting? And we talk about it as we do in life. And then you would go in with that kind of chance, in a sense, to rehearse with me. We do this in life every day. Everybody's doing it right now. Somebody's talking to a friend and saying, hey, how am I going to talk to my neighbor? How am I going to talk to my boss? How am I going to talk to my ex-wife? You know, and we go through it all, and you get prepared. You think you have an idea. You've bounced it off someone. You've been rehearsing the concept. You have a good idea of what you're going to do, why you're right and the other person's wrong. And then you go into life with that, and it takes care of everything. Now, let me say right here, before somebody says, yeah, well, that's real life, and, you know, this is acting. And I say, okay, except that in real life, it's for keeps. So if there was a better way for you to prepare for that meeting with your supervisor or that person with their ex-wife, I guarantee you they would use whatever that is. And if it was about acting, we would do that too. If breaking it into beats or coming up with an action verb I thought would help me, I would do it. But in life, we don't. We don't even consider it. It's like, come on, now you're not taking my life seriously. So my whole approach has been about reverse engineering, basically, how we approach things in life, and then using those same standards. So we talk about it like it's a thing. You're whoever you say you are. You're talking to me about your boss. We don't mention the things we don't mention in life. We don't talk about choices and action verbs and beats and things. This is, to me, archaic talk. It's antiquated nonsense. And I think we can get to where we want to go a lot more efficiently, a lot more quickly, and have a much greater effect on the scene than all this working it all out with a slide rule and planning things out kind of nonsense. That is what I think old school is. So to wrap it up, I'd say to you, yes, David, I think that this kind of an approach, and it does because I get new, older people all the time, it seems to be something they feel really comfortable with. They think, well, I can do that. And that makes sense to me. And then, you know, they get on with it. That's my speech, baby.
I love your speeches, and it makes so much sense because, you know, and I've talked with the other guests I've had on today, and it all comes down to storytelling still. And I remember you talking about if we saw two people on the street having an argument and we would watch it, and it was, you know, you're mesmerized by watching it. And if that was a scene in a TV show or a movie or on stage, you want to get that same, you want people in the audience to see the same thing, like it's real life. And that's where the
nothing is
is
greater than authentic life. That's what everyone goes for. And when you get close to it or when you nail it, that is always the thing people say. It's like, God, I forgot I was watching a movie. I thought, man, I felt so bad when that person died, even though we know they were in Venice at the festival the next week. They're not dead, but they're so compelling with what they're doing. It's so believable. It just seems so real that stuff usually shakes us, you know. That's the thing that really gets us. And I think getting there is a lot easier if you don't talk about acting and then be expected to forget the acting part to then try and do the real life part. Let's just cut out the middleman. Let's just not do that stuff. Let's just take for granted this is kind of happening. We all know it's a story we're telling, but for all intents and purposes, let's talk about this like we're real people, and you have a real problem with that real guy over there, and you've got a real situation, and let's just deal with it this way. Let's talk about it this way. I don't want to talk about it like we're actors. It's the silliest thing in the world. Why would we talk about the thing we're trying to avoid? Let's not even bring it up. Let's just talk about real stuff.
Yeah, and I've just talked to Janet McMorty, who's an actress as well as she has her own podcast, The Second Act Actors, and she's a doctor. And it's the same thing we talked about. A doctor doesn't go in there and say, what do I need to do here, my training or anything like that. They just are, and they just do. And that's what we need to translate as actors when we read the script and we learn the lines. Yes, we've got to learn the lines because it's not a real life thing, so it just doesn't happen like we're talking now. But once you've got that all down pat, is how do we take that script and just make it like it's the first time we've heard it, isn't it? And that's probably the hardest thing for an actor. But when you get it, you've nailed it, and it looks brilliant.
Yeah, and I would say, I always like to give examples. People think, well, that is the rub, and that is the rub, I suppose. You take the stuff that's preset on the page, then you say it like it's your own story. But an example I always give is, everyone has stories they tell in life. Something happened to them when they were a kid, when they won an award, something. They have a story. It's an evening. It's a story. They tell it. They retell it. They retell it. And you go through life. Hey, David, tell the story about the thing when you got the fish. And so you tell the story. And if you're an honest person and it actually happened, you repeat the entire story. And if I've heard you do it before, I'd know if you left anything out. And from what I can remember, that's the story. That's it. That's right there. So essentially, there was a bunch of lines, a story. You learned it. Okay, well, it happened. But still, these are a bunch of lines. Now you're going to retell all those lines. Now in life, it's never a pickle. In life, it's never a problem because I'm just going to tell the story. I'm not thinking about acting. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to tell it. I know what the story is. I'm going to tell it to you now. And to me, that is the theory, is that once you really understand what you're talking about and why you're talking about it, what the deal is, now I just have these words that I will happen to say, just like if it was a story from my life. They won't force me to do a certain thing with them. No, I know how to tell a story. And these words will come out in the order that they're on some page somewhere, or the order that they were in my memory from what happened. And it won't encumber me. And I could tell that story 50 times through my life. And if I get laughs, I will get laughs every time. But I'll never focus on, last time I told it, I kind of went like this when I said that line, and then I went like that, and I got a big laugh. Nobody does that. You just tell the story again, and it's the same thing. And a lot of people be hard-pressed to tell you the difference, but it's always fresh because you're not thinking of performing it. You're thinking of honestly telling the story again. Don't get me started, David. I do this all day long. David, I mentioned to you, I have 3 books that I'm finishing, 3 new books about the business that are coming out this next month.
Awesome. And that's a great segue. I wanted to talk about them. So the reason I'm getting everyone on this end of the year special, because you guys educate actors. You have a medium through the podcast and or books. And so now I wanted to talk to you, everyone that I listen to, because they are part of my journey as an actor now. And that's why they're on the show. So you are a podcaster through your education of actors. How does that allow you to reach the masses? And then you can segue straight into your books as we wind up. Thank you.
Well, listen, the thing about podcasting, obviously, is that, I get people from, Bahrain to New Zealand, Kenya. I mean, anywhere you have a computer, and you have bandwidth, you can obviously pick up the podcast. And not a lot of people are doing podcasts about acting and the mechanics of acting. There are shows that deal with actors and anecdotal, and they have guests and things. But mine's purely about the nuts and bolts. So it's kind of out there. So apparently when people look it up, it comes up, and then, people listen to it. Now I have 168 of them. So that has helped me certainly get a worldwide audience. So in my Zoom classes, for instance, I have people from all around the world and the South. And it's just, I don't know if a week goes by, I don't marvel at how amazing that is to hear this Aussie person speaking to this person in Calgary who's having a scene with someone in New York or whatever the deal is. I am fascinated by that part of the technology. But, having been a teacher now for 44 years, I wrote The Real Life Actor 11 years ago. And Stephen Pressfield, who wrote so many books, but certainly The War of Art, was a mentor of mine, and he had said that, you should just write as many books as you can possibly get out there, because he's written so many. And so I had these 3 books in mind that I've been wanting to do forever. And I just decided, let me just do them all at once and get them done. Because I had 3 books. One is called Showing Up Like a Pro. And that is really from when an actor gets the first email saying, show up at the set, whatever, blah, 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 to the end of the night when they are signing out after that day's work. Everything in between there, the do's and don'ts, what you must always do, never do, what all the departments mean, how you treat certain people, what to never ask for, what to always ask for, how to deal with tough actors, people that give you a hard time, directors, what do you do? And
Awesome.
the next one is called Directing Talent. And that is a book set up for primarily to try and make directors actor whisperers. Since I've spent my whole life being an actor and also talking to actors and coaxing actors as a teacher and as a director, I certainly also, as an actor, know the things you never do, always do, when you compliment, when you shouldn't say anything, how you get people emotional. Also, how to choose all your heads of departments, because I did have my own TV show for 2 years. So I know a lot about hiring people. And I also know when we made mistakes and why the mistakes were made. So I go through all the departments, and then I talk about everything that can happen on a set. How to deal with all the people, your cinematographer, problem actors, crotchety actors, brand new actors, scared actors, kid actors, and that's that one. And then the third book is called the Real Life Actor Scene Study Workbook, and that's 32 original scenes. And after each scene, I do a blurb, kind of a little a page on how to approach the scene, what to think about, and none of it has to do with choices and beats or any of those things. It has to do with the story, what's going on, and what you should focus on. And then once you've done that, you can go to the back, and there'll be yet another level of things to think about, some additional directing you could just try and see how it works for you. And so it's really a workbook. So somebody could get this anywhere in the world and go through 32 scenes and see, it's like I'm taking them through it to show you how this approach works and how much more freeing it is. So they're coming out in November on Amazon.
Beautiful. Just in time for Christmas, everyone. That's what I want for Christmas. Please.
That's what I want for Christmas.
Jeff, thank you very, very much. It's been awesome to see you and have you back on the show again for this very exciting and very scary interview special, but it's working really well, and I've got some great people with some great stories and great
thank you so much, David, for thinking of me, and I'm so happy you've had so much success with this thing and you've stuck to it. I know how hard it is to do these things, and you got a big full life, so good on you, man. Continued success. All right.
Thank you, Jeff. I will put a link to your pages and the books in the show notes, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, Dwan Johnson from Think Bigger Actors. Thank you for coming on my podcast.
Wow. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Is it morning for you?
It is morning for me. It's 9:48 Friday. We're in the future for you.
In the future.
If you want the lotto numbers, I'll give them to you after this. Cool.
I'll just try my luck. I'll try my luck with Friday.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
As I've repeated to each guest that I've had today, I'm doing this end of year special to bring in all the hosts of podcasts that I listen to, because they are part of my journey as an actor. And I wanted to be able to have that, to share those people with everyone that listens to my show, and to bring everyone together, because what I get from your show, someone else may never have heard from you, and now we get that crossover. So I wanted to ask you.
Oh, wait, David, is this like the crossover episode? Like when we have like TV, this is like, when like 90210 meets Melrose Place and stuff. This is like a crossover episode.
That. Yes, most definitely.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just having so much fun.
Hey, your podcast emphasizes a lot of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So how can someone like me, where I started later in life as an actor on my journey, leverage mindset practices to catch up and thrive in this competitive industry that we all have chosen to work in?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you phrase it that way, because I think that even within that question is mindset, right? It's like, how can someone who started later in that is a mindset reframe, thinking that there is because I didn't start when I'm 18 or 20 or whatever, that there must be something that I'm missing, right? Instead of shifting that thought on, I am starting at the perfect time. This is going to be my perfect time for jumping off in this industry, or for becoming successful, or my own definition of success. Or I started later in life. I missed all that stuff where, I had to crash and burn, or I could have like done drugs or whatever in my 20s or whatever. You're like, now I understand stuff, and I'm going to cut those corners. So how can someone use mindset at this age? I think you just like set me up, you teed me up, is to make sure that we understand that it's all mindset right now. And it's really, really important for you. If you started late in this life, it's just like, this is all about reframing. This is like, whenever you hear something, ask yourself this simple question: is this true? How do I know this is true? Starting with, starting later in life. How do I know this is a bad thing? How do I know this is anything? Great. I don't know that this is true. What's another way of looking at that? I would love to look at this like I'm starting right where I'm supposed to be. And then what would I like to think? And we move forward with that.
Yes, because a lot of people who do say that, I wish I'd done this when I was younger or whatever, they actually almost use it as an excuse not to do it now, don't they? And so that's where what you talk about on show is about just taking what you've got when you've got it and making it work today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would also just add there that I always like to say to my community is that your equation is off. It's really interesting that everybody can say, if I wish I had started later, but that is A plus equals C. They've missed a part of that equation. The B part of that, A plus B equals C, is that, okay, great. That's one way of looking at that. What's this way of looking at that? This way right now, that might be, I'm really excited to, start right now. And what I would say here is find examples to support you starting right now. So for example, Morgan Freeman comes to mind. You know what I mean? Like starting later in life. And right. Like that's something that, oh yeah, Morgan Freeman did it. Or, the woman who was on The Office who just decided to start later in life, after a second career, or people who have done that. So what you're doing is instead of looking at all the person who are like ingenues or started when they're 18, then you're like now thinking about, oh, there's a whole new support system or way I can look at this of these people who have started instead of looking the other way.
That's fantastic. I love it. Hey, what made you start your podcast? Just quickly, what's your background as an actor and how did you decide that, hey, I want to do this show and put it out there? And what were your reasons behind wanting to do that?
Yeah, I love mindset, period. The quick version of that is when I became a coach back in like 2015 or something like that, I went to get certified as a life coach. I did what's called the Think Bigger Actor Summits, where I would bring a lot of people together and we would do these big summits and talks, and they would be once a year. And then I just decided that it wasn't enough. I wanted to be able to speak to my tribe a little bit more. And so the natural progression of that was going to be the podcast. I've always loved mindset because I think that's the thing that will keep you in the game the longest. Everybody thinks it's going to be our craft in our industry. Craft in our acting, but that's not the thing. What I've known from all of my bookings, from all of them, yes, talent has gotten me through the door, but mindset has kept me there. Mindset has kept me in the room on set. And so what I like to do is make sure that I can bring that to actors every single week with people who are showrunners, with directors, with other actors, so that you can see that, yes, it's all about the other stuff, the craft and all that stuff, but mindset is the through line through all of it.
And does that help a lot? Because as actors, we all go through, and I've already talked about it today, and I talk about it consistently on my show, the peaks, which are fantastic, but the troughs, which we all hate, and we feel like at times that there's more troughs than the peaks. So how do we use that mindset to be able to navigate those treacherous waters, so to speak?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is, again, I'm not like toxic positivity. I'm always about like strategies here. And I think one of the big things to think about is just take the last year, we were in this big writer's strike, is to really stop thinking about it as peaks and valleys, like ups and downs here. And like everything is kind of just like this is all amazing. I've been booking some pretty great things these last couple of months. And although it's felt great, I have to also remember that keep on an even playing field, because there will be spikes and valleys, like you're saying. And if we don't think about it as like, oh no, now I'm not on set, this must suck, instead of, great, this is part of the industry. This is what we do. And that's all mindset is what I've done. This is all neutral. Everything's neutral until we put our own baggage and our stuff on top of it. And so for me, it's just kind of like, this year for a lot has been very intense. But for me, it's just been like, okay, I take the industry for what it is now, instead of I'm only happy when I'm booking. I'm only happy when I'm on set. That's how a lot of actors live their life. But if we can shift that mindset to thinking like, I understand this is the industry. This is just something I do as an actor. I'm also going to go out there and be an amazing dad. I'm also going to go out there and be a baseball coach. I'm also going to go out there and be the next inventor of a kind bar. So we're no longer do we have the adage of, if you can do anything else besides acting, you might as well go do that. No. You can go do that, and you can still be a committed actor when it counts. So I hope that answers it for you.
I love it. No, it's about that balance, isn't it? The balance of life. And that goes across to anyone. And I like to say that my show's not just for actors, because there are things here for anyone to take away. Now, just as we wind up, Dwayne, you were talking before about your tribe, and you say the tribe all the time. How important is community, or in this case, the tribe, to us as actors, us, me and you as podcasters, and bringing everyone together?
I don't think anybody has made it in anywhere that I know of in this industry without a support system, without a tribe, as I call it. I think it's so incredibly important to have some people that really get your language, that really understand, that really listen to you, that celebrates those wins you're talking about, that sees you might be in a little bit of a dip frequency wise, and be like, can help support you or hold you or just like sit in community with you. I think it's so incredibly important because a lot of people don't understand this journey we're on. They don't understand this journey. So for me, the Think Bigger Actors Tribe community is so important, because I also get to come to that community and get filled up as well.
I love it. I love it. And to finish up, Dwayne, you always end your shows with the D12 shot. So firstly, I've never been able to work out what is D12 stand for. or is that like Audrey Moore's, she drops, don't forget your towel. She won't tell us what it means. So do you have a meaning for it?
I don't know. I haven't listened to her podcast. I have to. But I want to say the D12 shot came from a client that after we finished our coaching sessions or after we finished our community talks, they all said, I feel like I just got a D12 shot. The D12 is like a B12 shot. So it's like a vitamin shot. We just want to be in.
I love it.
I wish it were more mysterious.
No, I love that.
It's like a D12 shot.
I love it. And to finish up, that brings it all back to what we've been talking about today with all my guests, is storytelling. And your D12 shot is a summary and it is a story. So how important is your podcast, not just from an educational perspective, but in that storytelling context, so to speak, to get things across to our audience?
I just want to say that there are people that my podcast reach that I will never know, that you will never know, David, it's reaching. And the fact that we get to tell these stories, that we get to have this conversation, and there's somebody in Bangladesh, there's somebody in Kentucky, there's somebody in all these different places that are hearing us talk about community and stories, and they feel a part of it already. It is so incredibly important. And again, we may never know how important it is to people, but our job as actors and as podcasters is to make sure we continue to tell these stories.
And that's why I asked you to come on my show, because I listen to every episode, but you don't hear me listening or see me listening, but I'm there. And I wanted to thank you for being a part of my journey on my acting career as we go. And so now you're a part of my journey as well, being on the show. So thank you very much for coming on, Dwayne.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. Welcome, Alicia Oxy. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I was just saying offline, it's so wonderful to be able to chat to people that I listen to every day on their shows. I go out on my walks and have the podcast playing in the background, but to be able to put a face to the voice is just fantastic.
Hi. Yeah. I'm so glad you listen.
And what I've said, what I'm trying to do is I just wanted to bring everyone that I listen to and everything that I get from their podcasts as an actor, and bring them all together on my show and talk about things that I generally get. So I have a quick question for you, and we'll go from there. But your guests, your podcast is that one audition, which I just love. And there's so many stories that I've heard of people's that one audition that they just want to talk about, good or bad, of course. But your guests often share pivotal moments from auditions. What advice do you have for any actors, or in my case, for late bloomer actors, approaching auditions that if you don't have the years of prior experience that younger actors or more experienced actors might have? What do you see from that?
I think everything is practice. Truly, it doesn't matter when you start. I think it's the consistency of practice. If you would ask me this question 5 years ago, it would have been a different answer. But now that we're at home, we're self-taping. You're literally, you can send a tape in from Australia. We're getting tapes from London. Not that we weren't getting those in America already prior to the pandemic, but now with us being mobile, starting this business, I always relate it to athletes. So many people that come on my show, I also was an athlete before. I had a regimen of a stretch for a half hour. I had a 3-hour workout on soccer, track, whatever it was. And then I'd have a half hour debriefing. I bring that into acting. So I don't care where you're starting. It's just, what is your practice? And are you practicing with guidance? I think it's good to check to see where your guidance is, because this is a numbers game. It's a numbers game as well as a work ethic game. Bill, I always quote Bill Esper on the show. I'm sure if you've listened to it, I always say it takes 10 years to start working as an actor. It takes 20 years to make a career. I just was interviewing somebody just right before this. So I don't care if you're starting when you're 8. I don't care if you're starting when you're 20. I started when I was 23. I felt like, oh my God, I'm starting so late. But we tell stories. We need people to tell stories that are in their 50s and their 80s. Like, stories are not just for 8-year-olds or 22-year-olds. So I have a membership for actors called the Bridge for Actors. And a big part of the component of how I teach acting, as well as how I conduct myself in my own career, is it's not just talent anymore. Talent you can practice. That's the part I'm giving you, right? You can practice. You can make yourself have talent. The other component of this business that I think you have to really work on is the mental health. It is selection, not rejection. It has nothing to do with you, zero to do with you, which I think that's the hardest thing as an actor, stepping into this playing field, learning all the technique, and then realizing you cannot take it personal. There's a puzzle. There is a piece of the puzzle missing. That's your audition. Are you going to be the piece that actually fits? And you cannot control that. You can do great script analysis. You can do a great fucking audition. Can I cuss on this?
Of course.
But you might not have that one groove that fits the piece. This great man that I just was literally interviewing, he comes from a background of music and he relates acting to jazz. It truly is jazz. You have to show up, kind of know the music that you're playing, but then look around at the world and stay connected to what everybody else is playing so you can come up with the best piece, the best project. I think a lot of actors try to do it right. They try to nail the script analysis, and then they get really frustrated that they're not, quote unquote, working. So I think you also have to change your mentality of what does it mean to be a working actor and how passionate are you about it? And just like starting a small business isn't normally in the black right away. They're in the red for many years before they start to break even, and then they start to have a profit. So let's see, are you doing this as a hobby? Are you doing this as a career? If you're doing it as a career, what kind of practice hours are you putting in? What kind of mentality are you working on? And then what's your knowledge of the business? And that does take 20 years to kind of really understand. I always stand behind that. That's a long-winded answer for a lot of different points.
I love it. And I didn't want all my questions always lean towards late bloomers because that's who I am and that's my show, because you've just pointed it out exactly there, that it doesn't matter where you are on this journey, when you started or if you're finishing it or where you are in the middle. It's the same requirements for you to push forward and keep that journey going, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look at Morgan Freeman. Look at Christoph Waltz. They started in their 40s. There's so many great, wonderful actors that have started, quote unquote, later in their career. I don't see that as a deficit. I just think what's your commitment to it? And I always tell my students as well as my own self, instead of jumping landings, like going up the stairs, what's the one small step that you can make every day, every year, every quarter, so you can see your progress? It's progress, not perfection. So you can stay in it. So if it's your first year, it's like, okay, I want to get some like camera relationship. I want to understand the lights. I need to understand story. And I need to understand what happens in a story. What part am I in the story? Where do I fit in? How can I service the story? A lot of actors are servicing themselves and not the story.
Yes.
So
I love that. And so many people that I've spoken to today it's all come back to story. You know, whether we're acting, it's a story. Whether we're a podcast host, talking to other actors, we're still a story. And I've had podcast gurus, for want of a better word, on today as well, and they're still the same. They are telling a story in their journalism. So, with that one audition, and this is what I love about your show, is it's hearing those moments where an actor is just something has happened that's so pivotal in their career. Is that what drives you forward in your podcast, and how excited you get every time knowing that you're going to get another story, that one audition?
I love people, David. I love people. I love playing people. I love creating people. I love getting to know people. Every week that I interview somebody, I get to do a deep dive on their history, where they're from, how they came to be. I'm a big person of studying human behavior. That's how I study my characters.
Okay.
So I like finding the patterns. And my great teacher, Warner Laughlin, she would always say, we seek to repeat until we know something different. So we are naturally, by nature, repeating a pattern constantly. So when I get to sit down and do an interview, I don't necessarily plan them out anymore. I find something in their career that tips me off, so I have a starting point. And then usually I'm seeking to understand the pattern in their lives and in their careers. And then when they disrupted that pattern and what was the result of the disruption, when we finally, that's where I think people's careers kind of do a big shift. You've been doing things kind of the same way. You come into some awareness as a person, as a artist, and then you watch that shift happen in work constantly. So that gets me excited. I also I've been marinating on this a lot lately. Development versus relevancy, the business of acting kind of puts us in those moments, but we're in those moments as human beings all the time. When we go from our teens to our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we're in a development transitional place. And then all of a sudden now we're relevant. Something's clicking, right? Even if you go with the industry, something's sticking. Oh my God, I'm getting every audition now. I'm booking things. You're going to go on a relevant turn for a while. But then it's like McConaughey being like, I don't want to do rom-coms anymore. That was a development phase for him. Even though he was Matthew McConaughey, he wanted to change how the world saw him. That development phase actually lasted like 2 to 3 years. Then he became relevant when we did True Detective and he did Dallas Buyers Club. So I like finding those, I call them peaks and valleys. I don't think they're peaks and valleys anymore, but early on in my interview process, I was always looking for the valleys and to see how people recovered out of them, or when they hit that mountaintop, how that felt.
Yes.
But now I've reworded it where it's like, okay, you're in a development phase here, and now you're relevant here. What did you learn about being relevant? And what did you learn when you got thrown back out in the development place? You know, and so that gets me excited.
I like that, because I've said it a couple of times today. I call them peaks and troughs, and you seem to have a lot more troughs than you do the peaks. But to have that approach to those peaks and troughs, or the valleys in your case, is just wonderful. Just as we wind up, there's been a lot of chatter about the changing world of acting. A lot of people are saying the industry's slowing down, AI is taking over, the money is moving in a way that actors are missing out, even though you had the strikes to go for better options, that the people with the power brokers with all the money they're finding other ways to make it. How are you seeing your actors on your show and people that you deal with dealing with that? Are they feeling it? Is it a negative overwhelming, or are we just moving with the new scope and learning to live with it?
I think we're moving into a new scope and learning to live with it. Just like when streaming hit, it was nobody wanted to do it. Again, I'm going to bring this back to development versus relevancy. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I've worked more this year than I've worked any other year. I've worked every single month this year. I've done 12 projects this year. Wow. I've never done 12 projects before. But what I did at the top of the year is I called for help. I called every producer, casting director, everybody I knew. I don't have an ego when it comes to projects. I want to work, and I want to work with good people, and I want to work on good stories, or I need to support myself.
Yes.
I think there's a shift in the business right now. So people that are used to just getting a phone call and not earning I don't want to say earning their roles, because their career earns their roles. But if they're in a development phase right now and they're not willing to go be a reoccurring for a few seasons, they're feeling the constriction right now, because there is a constriction. There's not as much stuff being made at this moment. I do think we're going to bounce back next year. There was a big saying going on in America. It's like, survive till 2025 and like then thrive in 2025.
Love it.
I think it's all perspective. I think we have to shift our perspective. It is tough right now. It is tough for a lot of people. I'm not disregarding that. But a lot of the people that I'm talking to on my podcast that are having a difficult time or having a harder time with this year are used to a certain level of relevancy. And that is shifted right now. That's all. It's shifted. And I'm going to hold out hope for that it's just a shift and we just need to hold on, and then we'll recalibrate. But that's also part of this business. Like I said, the development and the relevancy. So I have a girlfriend that didn't work for 3 years. Guess what? She just booked 3 reoccurrings. She's having a great year. So I think this business, if you're reading all the headlines, if you're staying in that space, it's going to get you down, and you're going to attach to the constriction. I don't want to be attached to the constriction. I want to remain creative. So if that means I have more time to write this year, okay, great. A lot of other people have maybe more time and space, or they have mortgages that they're worrying about. Then they need to put, I think, energy somewhere else at that moment. We can create. We can still create. Even the guy I was just interviewing before, he is a musician, and he was like, I can make music anytime that I want. I realized I had an epiphany this year. I never wanted to call myself a working actor. I am a working actor. Even if I don't work for another 3 years, I'm a working actor. I've been working for 20 years. So I think that's a mentality shift, and a chaos maker right now. There's a lot of negative stuff that's happening in the world, and man, do we love trading around those headlines or attaching to them. So that's maybe like I just wanted to be honest. I am having a good year, and I think other people are having good years, and a lot of people are not.
Yes, exactly.
So
That's
how do we
life,
hold
isn't it?
on? Just like 2 years ago, I was having a terrible time, and I couldn't blame it on the constriction, right? So we as actors tend to really we are emotional. I am emotional. We're sensitive. We want to take things personally. I'm not trying to take this constriction. I don't think any other actor should take it personally. And let's not attach to it, and go find a story that you want to tell and try to bring that to life, whether that's writing, producing it, going and shooting it with your friends. There's really no reason why you can't go out and make stuff right now.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a perfect way to end our chat today. Thank you very much. And I like what you said before. What was you saying about 2025?
Oh, survive till 2025. But I've changed it to like, let's thrive in 2025. Like, let's do that.
And what's scary, it's only 2 months away. So
I know. I know.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure for you to be part of this. It's turning out to be absolutely wonderful. I don't know how I'm going to squeeze everyone in, but I think it's just going to have to be a long episode, because there's just so many gold nuggets. It's beautiful. So thank you.
Thanks for
pleasure
having
to have
me.
you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Jordan Blair, welcome, welcome, welcome. I know the voice, and it's just so wonderful to have the face up on my screen and on my podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be on your show.
It's great. It's great. Now, I've been saying every time I've spoken to someone, this end of season special that I've had, I've brought everyone in that's podcasts that I listen to. Now, most of the guests have been acting related, and yourself and a couple of others are complete non-actors, podcast related, except you're a little bit different, and we'll go into that because you do tell stories. That's what I love. So you're from the Buzzsprout team, who is my wonderful podcast production company, which I love. And you're also one of the hosts of Buzzcast. Now, I didn't get my buzzers mixed up, which is good.
Yeah,
which is
it's hard to do.
Podcast that Buzzsprout puts out for listeners, or for anyone in general. That's correct, isn't it?
That is correct. Yeah.
Now, we'll finish up with a little bit about that. But I wanted to talk about your podcast, and your podcast hosting is with Dreamville. It's a bedtime story podcast. So very different to what I've talked about here, but it does come back to story. So even though it's acting focused, what insights from your podcasting journey could help actors like myself, whether they're late bloomers or just any actor, grow our creative careers through effective storytelling?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny that you said this. I don't think I talked about it like at all on Buzzcast, but it's so funny because you said that I was one of the non-actor guests, and I actually was a theater major in college.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go.
So I do get to have a little bit of an advantage in this interview just because like I do have a background in acting, and so I can speak to how it plays into podcasting absolutely, and how
Awesome.
so I was so excited to be able to tell you that. Like I do kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit.
I love it.
Yeah.
And everything comes in a nice circle, and everyone's joined, and that's what I'm liking.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so how does your storytelling come from? Now you, if I'm correct, I apologize, I've not listened to one of your podcasts because I go to bed and I just go to bed. But
me too. Yeah. Same.
But I believe a lot of people, the reason you put your podcast together was to read a story out for children so that they could fall asleep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my podcast because, I mean, it was 5 years ago, and bedtime story podcasts weren't really like a huge thing at that point. And I was trying to find a good podcast for my kids to go to sleep to, and I just didn't think that they were like that good of quality. And so I couldn't find what I was looking for, which is really the ideal position to be in, right? When you're starting a podcast. Yeah. And
Find
so
that
I could,
niche.
yeah, you find that niche. And so I was looking for something that was like highly produced, long form, had beautiful music to it, and obviously gorgeous storytelling. And what wound up happening was I got to utilize my theater background because I'm very used to playing a character. And so, you know, the voice that you hear on here is completely different than the voice that I use on Dreamful. And I also was a children's librarian for a time.
Well, there you go.
I know. So the pieces just fell into place, and I was like, I think this is my thing. And so, yeah, so that's how I got into that. But
awesome. And was that before you joined the Buzzsprout team? Before you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
podcasting came with that storytelling, but that was your first foray into podcasting, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I literally Googled how to start a podcast. And of course, Buzzsprout popped up because Albin's an incredible marketer. And so how to start a podcast popped up with Buzzsprout. And I listened to all their podcasts and I devoured them. And I was like, this seems doable. I think I can do this. And so yeah, I went with Buzzsprout as my host because I really fell in love with like the people that are there and just how easy they made everything. And then I was really active in their Facebook group, like overly active in their Facebook group. And they were like, hey, do you just want to be a moderator? And I was like, okay. And then pretty soon they were like, hey, we're looking for a podcast producer. Would you want to do that? And so that's, again, pieces falling into place, like just all over.
It's like I've talked about on my podcast a lot about the sliding doors moment, about how avenues and things come to you. And so, you know, if you go back 20 years ago, there's no way you probably would have thought, oh, I'll be working for a podcast host one day. So.
No. I was working at an accounting firm, and I listened to podcasts religiously while I was like bookkeeping because it's a horrendously boring job. It really doesn't take that much thought because the computer does it for you. So you're just crunching numbers all day. And so I just fell in love with podcasts there. And so that's really how I found it, was just through having a boring job. I fell in love with podcasts.
and now you're the resident expert for all us users.
Yeah.
I love it. And the podcast Buzzcast itself, was that a collaboration between everyone? You were on board with Buzzsprout then, and that's when the podcast developed? Because you've been there from day one for that show, haven't you?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh.
No, isn't that crazy?
Feels like forever for me.
It does. Me too, a little bit. But no, I feel like I've been on there for a long, long time. But before me, there was another producer there. And I mean, I think I came in, I want to say like 70 or 80 episodes in. Like,
Wow.
yeah, he had this like awesome project that he was moving on to. And so they were looking for a producer. And so I got to fill that role because I'd guested a couple times on it. And apparently they liked me enough that they wanted to keep me around. And so it's it's really cool. So I think what my gleaning of the story of them starting Buzzcast was, I'm not super sure on this, but I believe they said, we're a podcast hosting company. We need to have a podcast and we need to be able to like get information out to our users, and let's just do this. And yeah, if you listen to episode 1, there's a whole lot of like, okay, what are we doing? You can literally hear them figuring it out along the way, which is magical in itself. And I think that's kind of like the cool thing about our podcast is we use it to experiment, and we're very open with our listeners that we're experimenting here. Yeah. And sometimes things don't work. And if we fall on our faces and we're like, that didn't work, and then we move on to something else, but we're very open about it. And I think it actually is very fun for the listeners too, because we're so transparent about like, we're just going to try this new thing and that didn't work, but let's try this. And this is great. So I think it's great.
I love that. And a lot of the chat that I've had today with people has been about the tribe, the community that everyone's in. And now Buzzsprout is a business. They provide me a service. I rely on them for everything, but I feel part of a community. And I've been, I've had the Late Bloomer Actor mentioned on your show because I have I've inputted into, you've asked questions about, what do you think about this? And this way, we're doing this right. And so that's what I love about that, because it becomes a two-way street, even though you don't feel like you're part of it, you become part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're basically a regular on a show without like actually having like been on the show, right? Like, and everyone knows who you are.
Oh, wonderful. And I find it, because you ask a question every week, this week's question is, and I go, they answered me last week. I can't answer this question because I was on the last week's show, so I'll skip a week. Give someone else to go.
Give us a little space, play hard to get.
No, I love it. And that's why I reached out to you guys to be part of this show, because you are part of my journey as an actor, which is what I deliver in my show and put out there. So I wanted to bring on Buzzsprout to show people that how our stories are delivered. And how do you see podcasting delivering that world, on an educational context, because both podcasts can be scripted, interview style like we are, or just one person talking to camera and telling his opinion sort of thing, or her opinion.
Yeah. I think that what's really magical about podcasts is that it's different as a creator than having a YouTube channel, than getting a television deal, than making a short film. First off, it's exponentially cheaper. You don't have to have like the fancy camera equipment. You don't have to have costumes and makeup and sets, and you don't have to have multiple actors. Maybe you just have like a few that are really good at voice acting and doing different voices. And there's something so magical about the audio medium that transports listeners. So, if you are doing a podcast where it's like let's say a science fiction podcast, and you're in a spaceship, you don't have to build the set. You don't have to get spacesuits for everybody. You don't have to put someone in like alien makeup. You just have voice actors, and then you have like the sound design. Maybe you download some bleeps and bloops from like some free online form,
bleep and bloop site.
Yeah, bleeps and bloops. But the listeners, and they might be in the background. It's just like a small thing that people might not even notice is there. But like suddenly they feel like they're in that space. And then you have like, you can hear the air ventilation system, and you can hear like the doors opening as people are walking down the hallway. And it's just such a great thing because it's different in that you're not performing like to a camera. You're not performing on a stage, but you are delivering a lot of the same passion. You're delivering a lot of the same performance through your voice. And I think that it's actually like a really great medium for creators in that way.
Beautiful. And to wind up, what's your visions for podcasting in the future? I know a lot of the podcasts, they talk a lot that there seems to be a lot of negativity come out, but then the numbers come out and show the growing shows. And you look at the stats for Buzzcast or Buzzsprout, and that's probably different. So how do you feel about the future and where's podcasting going?
I think what I see is that, we tell people all the time that podcasting is a marathon, it's not a race. It's hard to grow a podcast. It's really hard to grow a show. YouTube, they've perfected their algorithm. They're great at getting people like in front of people. TikTok, same thing, right? And podcasting is a little bit more organic. It is a little bit more, you talked about the community and you talked about like the collaboration. It is more of that, because one of the best ways to grow your podcast is to get on other podcasts. And, when you do that, not only are you giving your time and effort to the host and all that, but there's also like a sense of like promotion in that, because you do get a chance to plug your show. You do get a chance to promote yourself and like win the audience over. And another thing that I think, really shows how great podcasting is that we get a lot of people that are saying like, oh, it's too late to start a podcast. Everyone has a podcast. Everyone has a podcast, especially after COVID. I mean, there was just like a boom because everyone was home. Yeah. And honestly, that has died down quite a bit. And I think we're hearing that a little bit less. But I mean, there's millions of YouTube channels, millions. And Buzzsprout, I mean, we're the largest podcast, like paid podcast hosting company in the world. And we only host 120,000 podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah, it's exponentially smaller. And so if you can put out a good podcast and you do your marketing right, get in the community, get to know other podcasters, the interesting thing about podcasting that I love is that it's not a competition. Like there's no competition. There's just like community. And so when you have another podcast that's in the niche, it's a great opportunity for cross promotion. It's a great opportunity to guest on each other's shows. It's a great opportunity to like lift each other up. And that's something that I really love about podcasting. And so I think that podcasting is growing. It is growing slowly. And I think that there was a whole lot of like, was it Chicken Little, like the sky is falling, podcasts are dying and,
Especially with the AI. We've talked about AI a lot today.
Yes. So, and honestly, I think that crappy podcasts are dying. I think that I think that good podcasts are just persevering and they're pushing through and like more coming in. I mean, I have more podcasts than I can even listen to, and there's plenty more that are going to come down the road. Yeah. There's plenty more that are going to come down in the next year or so that I'm going to have to add to my queue. But yeah, so I think that podcasting it's a great time to get into podcasting still.
That's awesome. And I know a lot of people in the Facebook group comment about their stats and their numbers. And someone said it to me, and I use it a lot now to say, well, it doesn't matter what your stats are. If you've got 20 people downloading your episode, which is not a lot, you think, oh, well, that's not a lot of people. But if you put it this way, if 20 people walked in and listened to you for an hour in a room, you'd be blown away, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, my office is way too small for that many people. There's no way they could fit in here.
Oh, that's awesome. Jordan, thank you very much. I know it's been very quick, but I've had a wonderful day today, and I've got so many people that have come on, and it's all a team and our collaboration come through. It's been brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
And I just want to say quickly before we do finish, I do love your laugh, and I don't listen to it at 1.5 speed. I listen to all my podcasts at normal speed. I don't understand how you can listen to someone talk so fast. So, especially you Americans, you talk so fast anyway, for me being Australian. I couldn't imagine putting it on the 1.5 speed or 1.25 speed because you're already so fast. Whereas us Australians, we're a bit slower and a bit more laid back. So maybe people speed us up.
No way.
Thank you very much, Jordan. It's been a pleasure.
Hello.
Hello, Anne. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. I was just saying to you offline, it's been a very, very long day, but it has been absolutely wonderful, this end of year special, and I really appreciate you being part of it. How are you?
I'm super excited to be here, David. I'm glad we finally made this happen. We've been sort of chasing this for a while.
It is. Yeah. And I talk about the time zones, and it's so amazing trying to balance and work out people's time zones. And you are the first person from Europe that I've had down. No, Germany's under one time zone, so that makes it a bit easier.
Yeah.
You're not juggling like America. You've got multiple time zones from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's fun,
Most
but-
of my clients are actually, well, they're in Europe, but luckily Europe mostly has one time zone, mostly like Western Europe,
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
other than the UK. But I also have a lot of clients in the US. So it's so true, trying to find that balance between everything.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
why this has worked out really, really well, because we're literally following the sun around the earth today as people getting ready. So it's
What
fantastic.
time is-
You are the host of the podcast Act Bold. It is in my list of favorite podcasts that I queue up straight away and listen to. So thank you very much. And what I want to chat about is that your podcast focuses on building thriving acting careers. Now, you are, if you don't mind me calling you, a late bloomer like myself, or
Sort of.
Yeah,
Sort
I
of,
had
yeah.
Janet McMorty's on as well, and her podcast is Second Act Actor. So you're
Yeah.
a bit of that as well. So you've come back after you've had your child and moved
Yes.
to Germany.
Like I was a professional actor from the time I was about 19. I mean, I studied and then I was a professional actor until about 28. And then I got married, had a baby, moved to Germany, actually moved to Germany, got married, had a baby. And then, yeah, I mean, it just threw a whole wrench in the thing because I didn't know how to speak German. So, you know.
That's amazing. I can't even get my American accent down, let alone learn a whole new language. So well
Yeah.
done. What's your advice for actors who are starting later or coming back to it and need to develop a career with a limited time and experience? And in your case, maybe even being in a completely different country.
Yeah. So for me, one thing that was really pivotal in getting my skills back in order, or in the case of someone who's like picking up a passion that they've always had but never studied about, was I started to bring in coaches to Munich. So I brought in amazing acting coaches from the UK, from LA, from New York. And I was doing that once, sometimes twice a month. And this helped me in many different ways. One, it got me the skills to get my skills back to a point where I felt like, okay, 16-year break. Now I feel good again. Let's get in there, you know? So that was huge. It also, I was able to study with these amazing coaches for free. I was able to build a community and take the courses that I wanted to take the workshops I wanted to take. It's like, oh, Meisner, oh, Chubbuck, oh, Laban, oh, right, Manimal work, oh, this, whatever it was. And so I was able to do that. I was able to build a community in my area with actors who I didn't know before. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, I was able to build a really sustainable side income that I could have turned into a full-time income, by the way. I mean, that's how lucrative it was.
Wonderful.
But that wasn't my interest, right? My interest was just getting my skills back. And after a year and a half, I was like, okay, that was good. But I still do use that particular thing because it's also super useful if you want to meet a casting director or you want to, right? If you want to meet them on eye level. So what can I offer you? And so bring them in to do a self-tape workshop, or a director, bring them in to do a scene study workshop, whatever it may be, someone that you're interested in working in. So it was such a pivotal way for me to get back into the industry in a way that gave me confidence and the funds I needed, because we know acting is super expensive, right? You have to get headshots, you have to get your show reel, you have to get an editor, you have to have, you have all of these things that we have. And of course, we have to be working on our skills. So that was the first thing. So this answer is sort of twofold. The second thing was, and I love that. I'm actually, I don't know if this is the place, and if it's not, you can definitely cut this out. But I am considering doing a workshop teaching actors how to do this, because for me, what was so useful was as I said, I didn't speak German when I moved to Germany, and my German just wasn't good enough that I was going to throw that extra wrench into my, trying to learn acting again. By having to figure out the language and express myself in another language that I didn't feel 100% comfortable in. And so for me, it was also, I was able to bring people to me in this sort of desert location of English speaking workshops. So I know a lot of my clients are like in Idaho or in Utah, or, it could be in the middle of, somewhere else, Tasmania, whatever it may happen to be, right? Where they feel like there's sort of a drought of what they need. And so they can bring the people to them, because really you only need a handful of other actors to make it viable and sustainable. So that was one. So if people are interested in that, I am considering, I don't have anything to sell at this point, but I'm considering doing a workshop around that. And the other thing was, when I was young, right, when I was in my 20s, I feel like the world just kind of opens its doors to young people in a way that doesn't happen when you're over 45. And I was 47 when I returned to acting. And that was 11 years ago. I'm 58 now. So still young. We're all I have a lot of life left. Absolutely. No, I mean, I don't even say that like as a joke. I have a lot of life left, and I plan on living it, and I don't feel like age is any kind of a block. But what you don't have is the advantage of sort of like this blind, this is going to work, and why wouldn't it work? And right, because you've had some experience in life, and that, things don't come necessarily that easy. So what I realized about 5 years, it took me about 5 years back into my journey, because the first 5 years I was sort of doing everything I had been doing when I was in my 20s. I realized that if I actually wanted to start to get extraordinary results, I was going to have to take extraordinary action. I couldn't just continue doing what everybody else was doing and what I had been doing as a young actor, even though that it worked for me, right? I was SAG-AFTRA, I was working on my equity card, I didn't have another sustainable job or whatever you call it. I was able to live just from being an actor. But it wasn't because of strategy. It was because of, I would say, more luck, just being in the right place at the right time. And of course, I believe in my skills. I'm a good actor.
Of course.
Right. But
sometimes it's about the right doors being there when you're in the right location.
And so that was what I really help actors with now, is figuring out literally how to get into the rooms that matter. And that's based on a 5-pillar framework that I use, that, mindset, branding, marketing, networking, and community, and really building those pillars holistically so that you're setting up a strong foundation so that you always know what you have to do to keep moving forward. As opposed to, I think so many actors will like, okay, now it's been a few months. I'm going to send out my email blast to the casting directors or agents if they're looking for that, or whatever it may be. But there isn't a whole lot of thought other than like, consider me, please, think of me. And there's luck involved with that too, because if you happen to hit them at a time when they're looking for your type, that may work. But there are better ways to go about it so that it's much more strategic and is actually building relationships because people like to work with people they like. It really boils down to that. And also they need to know what you're capable of.
Yeah. And I love that. And that comes through quite clearly in your podcast, which is wonderful. And throughout everyone I've chatted to here, it's all come down to, several factors of what podcasts are. It's education. It's about building a community and establishing contact with people and learning so you can pick and choose. So it's great because we have access to so much now with the internet. And, I listened to your podcast coming out of Germany, and that is just amazing because 10, 15, 20 years ago, me and you would have never met, and I would have never known what you had to offer, and anything that you do offer would have to be local because you wouldn't have that reach unless you had that ability to jump on a plane and people learn from you that way. But 1 in a million of people got to do that because there was no way to sell yourself to the world. And that's what's wonderful about this medium, I feel.
Absolutely. It's also like, for me, I don't know. Yeah. I really love being able to share what I've learned. First of all, it kind of helps me stay accountable to myself, You know, that's, it's not entirely altruistic, right? I mean, because I'm one of those people, I think I learn best by teaching. So, and like, it helps me to really solidify, it's like, you know, and put it into like concrete words. This is working because this and this and this, which helps me to refine it. And so, yeah. And then to be able to share that knowledge, because as you know, acting can be a very disempowering journey, because there's only one thing that's really not in our control, and that is somebody else's decision.
True.
And everything else, do they know you're alive? Do they know you're talented? Do they know where you fit into the different worlds that they are casting? If those are all within your control, whether they know that or not. And so that's what I think, you know, most actors should be concentrating on, are things that you can actually achieve, as opposed to, you know, I have so many clients that'll originally come to me and they'll be like, yeah, I want to star in a Netflix series. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's great, but it's intangible.
Yes.
It's not achievable in itself. You have to first get the other milestones along the way.
I love that. Thank you. This has all been about showing people what their journey is as actors and how we're all connected. And that's why I brought on all the podcast hosts that I listen to, because they make my journey better. And I learn so much from all of them. And now by bringing them into my show, that journey is now joined. And that's what I wanted today, was to share what I learn and who I know, so that if I can get one more person to listen to Anne Alexander Cedar and her podcast, then I know that they're going to learn something from her and move on their own journey together.
Well,
So
I
thank
really
you very
appreciate
much.
that, David. Thank you for this opportunity. And it's a beautiful idea.
Thank you very much. It's been short and sweet, which is fantastic. With everyone that's on board, it's going to make it for a fantastic episode. I will share the links to everything that you do and links for your podcast in the show notes, so that we can continue on this journey together. So thank you very much for coming on today.
It has been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we have Rachel Baker back in the house. How fantastic. She was on earlier in the year. Welcome back to the show, Rachel.
Thank you. I feel like it was really not too long ago that I was here.
No, that's the nature of this year as well. It has gone so fast. It's hard to believe that it's October and Christmas is just around the corner.
I know. It's a bit exhausting, but yeah. This happens every year though. We're like, oh my God, how is it October? And it's like, this is what we said last year.
I've had a long day with plenty of guests, and there's been a theme that has come through a lot, and it's all about community. Has been one of the biggest one, and storytelling. So your podcast, Don't Be So Dramatic, explores the roles of different people in the industry. So for all actors listening to this show or getting on board your podcast, regardless of where they're starting in life, whether they're a late bloomer like myself or they're young straight out of university, how important is it to understand all aspects of the entertainment industry beyond just the acting component?
Yeah, well, that is kind of why I started my podcast as well, is because I wanted people in the industry to be more informed about like how different people work, and from the perspective of someone who does that thing. And what I mean by that is, like, I feel like, you know, when we're giving advice to actors and, you know, you're doing a workshop with a casting director or a director, you're always given the advice of, well, my advice to actors as a casting director. And I always found that really repetitive. And so what I think is really interesting is just hearing the story of how a casting director got to where they are, and like what it is like for them to work, and understanding, because I think as an actor, you are very focused on yourself and your work and the work that you are getting and how you can get more work, but you are not necessarily thinking about how that casting director's day has gone, why they are not replying to your email at that certain time, because there are whole other person living a whole other life, you know.
Yes.
They're not like, they've got other things to do. And so I think when you can understand the different roles in the industry and how, like, what their day-to-day looks like, how they work, what their jobs are, you begin to understand that you're just like one piece in the puzzle, you know. And I think that that is really humbling and grounding, and I think that that's really important as an actor to aim for those things, because it takes away that feeling of this is my whole world, and when someone says no to me, that's me being rejected, that sort of thing. So it opens up this whole like discussion around rejection and getting jobs and not getting jobs, and realizing that you are just one piece in the puzzle, and it really doesn't mean anything if you do or don't get a job. You know, it sucks, but it doesn't mean anything.
And I think, and a lot of your guests, you really promote a lot, and they talk about a lot that, and it comes down to what I said at the start of the question, was this community, that they are part of our journey together, and they want us to get the job as much as we want to get the job. So they're not a gatekeeper, is the word I used when I interviewed a casting director. A lot of people think they're a gatekeeper, but they're not. They are just another cog in the wheel, part of our journey. And that's what we need as actors to understand, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I always think about how hard it must be for people like casting directors or like directors in the industry, because imagine the amount of people, probably specifically actors, during their day or on social media, who kind of take this idea of trying to get into their good books. And I feel like they would never know if someone just genuinely wants to give them a compliment or wants to be their friend without the guise of, oh, I want you to like me so that you'll cast me in something. I think that must be really hard being in certain jobs in the industry, because you just never know what people's intentions are. And I think community is so important, and that kind of encapsulates this idea of networking as an actor. And I think some people can misconstrue that idea of networking by thinking that you need people to like you, and you need to go and message people in positions of power or that have done something that you enjoy or want to do, and try and mold yourself to be something that you think they will cast or that they will like. And in doing that, in networking in that way, you lose yourself and you lose the thing that is going to make you castable, which is being you, which is your uniqueness. So
Yes, definitely.
yeah, I think that's really interesting.
And networking, I've always hated the word networking, because I come from a government agency, and networking is how people get promoted. And I've always seen that in a negative light, because it's jobs for the boys and who you know and that sort of stuff. Whereas the networking we're talking about in an acting context it's more than likely a lot of people do it that way, but it's the wrong way to do it. Networking is about knowing people and sharing what you've learned and sharing your journey, which is what I do on my podcast, is what you do on your podcast, about sharing information so that other people can speed up that process of their career. And that's the positive side of it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you say, like networking, it's a very like corporate thing. Whereas I think networking in a creative industry, it's very natural. You will naturally gravitate towards people that you have things in common with, that like you can share some sort of your story with, that's going to resonate with them. Like, not everyone that you or I email is going to want to be on our podcast, and that's fine. And so I think I always take, who wants to be on it as cool. Like, I believe that there is a reason that this person and I are connecting on this podcast, and not trying to think, oh, everyone's going to be on my podcast, everyone's going to want to network with me. I think the people that you're meant to work with always end up finding you and wanting to work with you too. And so rather than it being like an uphill battle of, oh my God, you idolize one person and think, I've got to network with them. I've got to find a way to get in the room with them and network and be friends with them. Just knowing that the right people are going to gravitate towards you, and those are the people that you should be, quote unquote, networking with.
Exactly.
And I find that as well, like people that I've become really good friends with have become really successful in the industry. And in some ways that has benefited me as well. And I didn't become friends with those people because I thought, oh, they're really good. I know they're going to make something of themselves one day. Just that we were friends. And I think that that's really cool that it happens that way. And it's not like I'm going to be friends with this person so they can do something for me kind of thing. And I don't really like that, but yeah.
I think it comes down, and we all talk about this a lot on your show and my show and any podcast that I listen to, is that imposter syndrome, isn't it? And I've found, especially today and this year, because I've interviewed a few podcast hosts that I listen to, I've come in with this, oh my God, I'm talking to Rachel Baker and I'm talking to this person, I'm talking to that person, because I was excited. And then they are, most of them have been surprised by that. Well, oh my God, no, I'm just you. And we're just all normal people doing the same thing and sharing information. And that's what I love. And that's why I've brought everyone together today to interweave our journey together and show people that that's how you get forward in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with imposter syndrome, it can be helpful. It can be helpful in a way that it kind of keeps yourself in check. But I think it's a great thing to also overcome for yourself in those moments, as you say, like today for yourself, when you are talking to people that you look up to and that you appreciate their work. It's great to remind yourself, I am in the room with this person. So what does that say about me? It means that I am good enough to be here. I'm good enough to be doing the work that I want to do. And I think that that's really important for all of us to consistently remind ourselves, because we get told so many times no, that I think unconsciously we go, oh, I'm not good enough.
Yes.
But the reality is you are good enough, and it's just the opportunities that are right for you are going to be the ones that are the yeses.
Beautiful. And that's so pertinent when you're getting into the room with the casting director, because they are just another part of the cog in the wheel. And at the end of the day, the casting director doesn't make that decision. They are just helping you get to the right person, and someone else makes that decision essentially in the end. So that's the journey we're all on, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm working on something at the moment, and I always think, like, I know actors who I'm thinking about when we go into casting, and they don't know that I'm thinking about them. And it's someone I could have met when I was in an acting class or something. And so it just reminds me, like, you just never know who is going to call you one day and be like, hey, like, I've got a role for you. You know what I mean? So it's not always about the casting directors. It just have no idea where these opportunities are going to come from. They could come from anywhere. And I think that's really exciting, because it kind of alleviates that pressure that if you feel like you're not impressing the 10 casting directors in Australia, that also doesn't matter.
Exactly. Well, that's a perfect moment to end it on. Thank you very much, Rachel. It's been a pleasure to have you back on the show. I know it's quick and short and smart, as they say, but it's been a brilliant day today, and it's been so much fun having everyone to come on for this end of year special. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it so much.
It's great to see you again. Thank you. Emily McKnight is in the house. Welcome to the Late Bloomer Actor. Thank you very much. You are my lucky last for the day. 12 guests I've had since 7 a.m. this morning. So welcome and thank you.
Well, it's amazing to be here, and well done you. That's super impressive.
I'm so surprised that it has worked. As I said to you offline, we're just starting to get some internet glitches now. That might be the 5 p.m. everyone's home from work day. So, but other than that, it's been a wonderful day, and everything's worked flawlessly. So I've loved it. Now, Emily, you are the host of An Actor Survives here in Australia, so a fellow Australian podcaster, so thank you. Your podcast explores how performers stay grounded through the ups and downs of this industry, which is something I've been talking about all day, the ebbs and flows of the industry. So for all actors, whether they're starting later in life or starting straight out of university, what's the key, in your opinion, to staying resilient and thriving, especially when the path it isn't straightforward?
I'm never one to give just a simple, this is the key. If there was a key, my gosh,
we'd be
that's
all rich.
Right. But one of the things that I do on my podcast is I ask every guest for their top 5 survival tips on how to survive a career in the industry. And one thing that recurs quite a lot, which I've really held on to myself, is building your community. So having friends both within the arts and outside of the arts that love and support you no matter what, that you can talk to about the ups and downs and that can go through it with you. That has really, that's been, as I say, a recurring theme, recurring tip that people have given. And I've definitely noticed it in myself. The more I am part of a community, both giving and receiving, in that the easier it does become, because we are all in it together. And, you know, if you didn't get that part, maybe someone amazing did, and you can celebrate them and get to know them and make a new friend out of it. And being able to celebrate and support each other and therefore be celebrated and supported in return, I think is absolutely a way to survive it and to be resilient. And then I guess the other one would be just trusting in yourself, and that not getting where you want to be is really frustrating and can be really upsetting and can be really depressing, but it doesn't actually mean anything to do with the ability that you have or the passion that you have. That is your driver. And yeah, we can all get better. We can all improve our skills. But if you didn't get something, it's so easy to go, oh, it's because I'm rubbish. That's just not the case. And so having that belief in yourself to continue the work, but also to know that, yeah, you're good enough to be there and you deserve a place in the industry.
I love that. And a lot of your guests, they all talk about it. You've had some well-known Australian actors on your show, and it's liberating, isn't it, to hear them speak the same way we feel every day. And you just go, oh my God, that's how I feel, and I'm nowhere near your class of actor. And they go, oh no, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I've really tried to get a lot of different actors with lots of different types of experience, some that, you know, are really just beginners and some that are really experienced, just because I want it to be a conversation about how we all do it, not about, oh, this person's famous, so they'll have all the secrets. It's so refreshing when you get somebody that you perceive as successful go, oh yeah, well actually, you know, there were a couple of years there where I got 0 acting work, or I got rejected from this really huge job that I really wanted, or whatever. And just that idea of community, and we're all in it together and we're all on this journey. It's been a magical thing for me in my own personal growth to be able to have those conversations.
And is that so? How long have you had your podcast going, and what made you say, you know what, I'm going to put a show together?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try and make it quick. The way that the idea first bubbled was because I was struggling. I'd done drama school, done all the things, just wanted so badly just to get some work as an actor, and just wasn't getting any. And started to really go, well, how do people do it? How do I get up in the morning with no agent or no auditions and go, do I still get to call myself an actor? What happens when I get the job and then I get rejected? And what does that mean? Does that mean I'm terrible? Or what happens if I get the job and then I get imposter syndrome and I can't do it, or all of those things? So I had all these questions in my own life. And then I went, oh, you know what? I'm going to interview people and find out how they do it. And then I'm going to put it in a book. So we have this like resource package. And then I went, wait a minute, people don't read books. They listen to podcasts. I'm going to make a podcast. And I literally had never listened to really any podcasts at that time. And it started on Zoom with Kate Mulvaney was my first guest, because I emailed her and said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this podcast. Here's my idea. Here are the questions. Would you be a guest? And she went, yes, but it has to be this weekend because I'm in America about to film. It has to be this weekend on Zoom. And I just went, okay. So I just jumped on Zoom and hit record, and that was the start. And then I went, I guess I make a podcast now. And then I've had to learn everything. I've had to learn about all the equipment and how to edit and how to make it happen. And, it's hard work for sure, but I really love it. And it's amazing that people listen to it. It always is amazing to me that people like it too.
I'm the same, and I was just saying to Rachel that I've had all these guests on today that I've got, oh my God, I've got so-and-so from such and such a podcast on, and they go, oh my God, you're excited about it. I'm just a podcaster.
I know.
So we're all the same. Yeah. I love it. And it's hard because as podcasters, as actors, we don't get a lot of feedback. So, you go into the casting room, or you send in yourself tape, you don't hear anything back. You put your episode out there, you don't get a lot of feedback back. People are listening, but people don't tend. YouTube, not like YouTube where people comment because they're sitting in front of their computer or there. It's a lot easier to go, hey, I'm going to throw a comment down. But podcasts are out walking or they're doing the dishes or whatever, so they don't have that ability to really leave a comment. So you don't get that feedback, and that's the hardest thing for an actor or a podcaster.
Yeah,
isn't
it totally is. And I tell you what, it is so meaningful when you do hear from someone. So to anyone listening, go to your favorite podcast and just send them a message and just say, hey, I really like your podcast. Because I'll tell you, it makes such a difference. There have been times where I've been like, oh, maybe, is it too much work, or do people really like it or whatever? And then I'll get a message from someone going, hey, you know what? I was thinking of quitting acting. This happened to me once. I was going to quit acting, and then I found your podcast and now I'm inspired. And I was like, what? What? I didn't know. I don't even know you.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And it is that you only need one person to come back and say, I've taken something from you, and that makes you just go, oh my God, it's worth the effort now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm also, by the way, very keen to not put myself on any pedestal. Like, I don't have all the answers. I'm just going on this journey, and I happen to be recording conversations I have with people. And I'm very careful I don't want to be like, oh, I've got all the answers now. I absolutely don't. I'm still exploring it.
I'm the same. And Type Talent is a small school here that does acting classes, 6-month classes, and they've taken me in for each class as a mentor. I go in there because of my podcast and my involvement in the Adelaide community, which talk about imposter syndrome right there. But it's that same thing of, they asked me once to say, oh, how come you don't do any training or delivery or sell a course? And I said, well, I don't want to. I started my Facebook group that I run here, and then I started my podcast, not because I want to sell something, but because I want to give back to that community and share what I've learned, because there can be so many hurdles along the way that if I can make someone find one way around a hurdle to get their career further forward, then I've done my job, and that's what I do it. And I think that's what everyone I've spoken to today that's why they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. So I thank you very much for coming on. I know it's short and sweet, but today has just been such a wonderful day, and the stories that have come out, and we're all on similar paths together. So it's a pleasure to have you on my journey now as an actor, and to be part of yours. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. And I can't wait to listen to the episode with all of the guests and be inspired by them all. So that's awesome.
And if you can leave a comment and rating and review, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
As we all
That's
say.
right.
Oh, thank you, Emily. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.